Metallica, here they come, the kings of metal.
Hey, this is Scott Pingle from S&M2, and you're listening to Metal Up Your Podcast.
Welcome to Metal Up Your Podcast. I'm Ethan Luck.
And I'm Clint Wells.
This is episode 149. Excuse me. And we're going to be talking about something scandalous. A Playboy interview.
Ooh, now I've never held or seen a Playboy. I read this on the internet. I actually downloaded it from Napster.
Got it off Napster, and I got it off LimeWire.
The truth is, Playboy is actually a pretty dope magazine, aside from the nakedness in it.
The only...
Which don't get me wrong, is also dope. I just mean I don't want to sound like a pervert. I don't have a subscription to Playboy,
Right?
But I have browsed through Playboy magazines. I am a fucking grown up after all.
My first recollection of having a Playboy magazine in my hand was when I was, probably in 4th or 5th grade, and my dad had a few.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, but I was like next to the coffee table, this little side table, and I was like lifting up the Rolling Stone magazines, and all of a sudden I was like Playboy, and I was like, you know, I'm a kid, and so my friends over, I was like, let's take it outside. And we were like the most...
Take it outside.
Well, my mom was like in the kitchen cooking or something, and it's like, we both like ran outside so suspiciously, like, where are you going? Nowhere!
I definitely don't have a Playboy under my arm.
No, not at all, Mom. We're not going to be outside. Yeah, it was, and we got about 2 pages in, and here comes my mom. We like hid behind the bushes and stuff to like look at it.
Right. That's there's an innocence in that. I think most men have stories of their adolescent years of finding their way through and navigating that jungle of misery and beautiful shit in there too. And that's all tied in with like your first hand you held, the first kiss, your first time you were intimate with someone. And I think that a lot of that's encapsulated in the spirit of Playboy, which is what Hugh Hefner was kind of going for, obviously.
Right.
But it also really was... Especially at the time of the article that we're about to read, it was something that a lot of people read and really went to for the articles.
Yeah,
it was a respectable journalistic enterprise. Is what I'm trying to say.
And it was always a constant joke when someone's like, "I just get the magazine for the articles." Like, yeah, sure you do.
Right.
But yeah, on the nudity side of it, I'm glad that I never got like into porn or anything like that. I mean, I don't know if I consider Playboy porn.
Right.
But I'm just glad I never got down that rabbit hole,
right?
Because I knew people that got like way too obsessed with pornography and stuff. It just seemed like a dark world. But hey, the articles are great.
I mean, I'm personally pro porn. I don't look at it that often, but just conceptually, philosophically, I think it's fine. Yeah. I would regard someone who's addicted to pornography the same way as someone who's like addicted to cake. It's like it doesn't occur to me to be addicted to cake.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with cake. Too much of it's real bad for you, just like porn. But you need a healthy, balanced diet, and you need to eat shit that's not cake, and you need to treat yourself with cake sometimes. I know that James Hetfield has narrated an anti-porn documentary.
He did,
so I know that he's probably lays on the more conservative side of the issue.
Right.
That it degrades society, ruins marriage, whatever those people say. I'm not sure much of that's true. I guess I haven't seen the documentary, though, so maybe I'm talking out of turn.
I mean, I think there's there's an opposite side of the pornography industry that is kind of fighting it, and yeah, there probably are many cases where it does destroy a marriage or a relationship or whatever, or a relationship with a father and daughter or mother and daughter, whatever. But I don't know. I didn't want to test the waters, is all I'm saying.
Right.
You know?
That's like saying, like, I'm glad I never tried heroin.
Right, exactly.
Because the problem with heroin, from what I've read and what I've seen, is that it feels pretty fucking good.
Sure.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that is a very big problem.
It's addictive because it feels so great.
Yeah, I guess I'd rather have any of my friends subscribe to Playboy over doing heroin.
Right.
But didn't Playboy stop doing nudity a couple years ago?
I don't know. Maybe. Perhaps.
I don't know.
I haven't really kept up with the wares of Playboy, as I was never really a patron. But Thank goodness that articles like this were made available elsewhere. I mean, I remember reading this at the time, probably online somewhere.
Yeah.
But of course, having a band like Metallica, especially an article as incendiary as this one, would have driven people to buy the magazine. So,
absolutely.
I mean, obviously it was commercial appeal, and Metallica coming out of 99 and 2000, especially with the Napster stuff going on, was just huge publicity.
A ton of publicity, and also under a massive microscope because of all the Napster stuff.
And this is the first interview we've ever highlighted on the show. We're going to do this whole episode dissecting the Playboy interview, and that's because so much crazy stuff was going on. So this was conducted in late 2000, which our last proper episode, we burnt down the year 2000. Then we did Napster, of course, with Moke. But just so much went on, and they with the I Disappear got leaked. They sued Napster. They were embroiled in this whole thing, the Summer Sanitarium tour, James Hurts is back, all this. And Jason, like a pressure cooker, is just unbeknownst to all of us, getting ready to leave the band.
Yeah, not long after this interview. I mean, you can even pick it out easily throughout this interview. I mean, and they all got interviewed separately. But the way it's kind of timelined in the article, it seems like in some cases they're in the same room, even though they're not.
I actually knew that they were interviewed separately. I've known about this interview, but rereading it this week, it is written pretty well in such a way that it really does. That the guy did a good job, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, he definitely did, and you can see, or sorry, read the tension in the band at this point.
Oh man, it's awkward.
Yeah, I mean, there's some harsh little digs in this interview.
They ended up defending it. So another thing we're gonna do, we're gonna read through. We're not gonna just read and dictate the interview. We've highlighted notable sections that I think are going to spark some interesting conversations about the band. We are going to do an episode, maybe even next week, is going to be a full thing on Jason quitting the band.
Yeah, and Rob coming in.
Because there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I've learned a lot through reading the So What magazines. So after we burn through what's relevant in the interview, there's a roundtable interview that Stefan Shirazi, I don't know how to say his name, Shirazi?
Sure.
Like a delicate wine, a nice
Merlot.
A nice 2001 Shiraz Stefani Merlot. We're going to read through this roundtable at post Jason leaving. So you just mentioned it, but the interview was conducted separately with the boys at the end of 2000. It came out in March of 2001. And Jason quit the band in January of 2001.
Yeah, so
the
this
timeline
is
is a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah,
here.
it is.
And just to be clear, we are done talking about pornography. Is that the case? Have we?
We are done talking about pornography.
Bookmarked that. We were wading into some pretty dicey waters there for a second.
I know that could have gone in an interesting direction.
Well, here's the deal. We're an All Metallica podcast. Ethan and I are two professional touring musicians who make time every week because we're good friends and we love this band Metallica. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to the show. Welcome to the ride. We have 3 years for you to catch up on.
That's it.
We have an email from a listener coming up later, a dude that just got on the ride. And I think he's trying to go through chronologically. So he shot the Hail Mary email. I think he's on like episode 7.
Yeah, we get that quite often of people just discovering the podcast, which is great. We welcome one and all. But it's sometimes I feel kind of a cringy feeling for them because I'm like, you have so much content to get through.
Yeah.
I can't imagine just like, I mean, I guess if a podcast came out that I was like, whoa, this is going to be awesome, and there was 149 episodes, I'd be like, this is great. So much content to go through.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten several emails of people who did binge it in that way, and then they were sad when they finally caught up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like binging a show. Once you get caught up, you're like, now you got to wait months for the next season. But in this case, you don't have to wait a week for us.
That's right. And so on weeks like this, so this is, as of this recording, this is a Tuesday morning here at HQ2. I'm getting on a plane tonight to Vegas. You're flying out Thursday. Where are you going this week?
I'm going to Salt Lake City and Vegas.
Oh, that's right. We're going to just ships in the night.
Ships in the night. Ships in the desert.
Ships in the desert night.
Ships in the desert night.
Good night to our continent.
I am excited about that Las Vegas show I'm doing with Brandy because she plays, like third to last or something. I'll be packed up, loaded out, and the headliner is the Foo Fighters that night.
Oh, is it a festival?
It's a festival, yeah.
What is it?
It's called the Intersect Festival. Let's see who's on the schedule. A band called Japanese Breakfast.
Okay.
Spoon.
Hell yeah, Spoon's great.
Leon Bridges.
Leon Bridges is great.
Brandy Carlisle.
Mm-hmm.
There's something for 10 minutes on stage called the Expanse Drone Space Opera.
Okay.
Don't know what that is. Anderson .Paak, and then Foo Fighters.
My buddy Rico Allen plays drums for Leon. He's a great drummer. I should get you guys hooked up before you go. You guys should meet while you're there.
Sure, yeah, I'd love to.
Great drummer. And I think my friend Ian just did Leon Bridges' new record.
Oh, cool.
So
awesome.
You should check that show out if you can.
I will, for sure.
And I've never seen the Foos before.
I've seen them one time here in Nashville Municipal Auditorium on the 1x1 tour when they were midway through the show, they were doing the acoustic portion on a separate stage.
With Times Like These.
It was awesome. Yeah, it was a great show.
That One by One record had All My Life. That was a good record.
Awesome record, yeah.
The Municipal Auditorium, that's kind of a shithole.
I mean, it's just a smaller arena. But I mean, at the time, they had big songs, obviously, but I don't know if they were selling out arenas yet.
Dude, they were huge then, though.
They were huge, but
they'd already. I mean, Color and the Shape was out.
Yeah, Learn to Fly,
Monkey
came out.
Wrench.
Yeah. But I mean, if you go back and watch the documentary, man, they weren't like playing arenas yet.
My Hero, yeah.
That was a big.
You know
record,
what probably took them to arenas was Times Like These. That was such a massive hit.
Yeah, Times Like These. I mean, All My Life too. I mean, that video was great. It was everywhere. It was
what a great band.
I know, they're such a good band. I don't love every single record. I think the last few are still solid.
I got off the ride. The last record I got was In Your Honor.
In Your Honor's awesome. That was the double record.
Yeah.
The record that I was kind of like, was the when they did the 8-part documentary or whatever, where they record in different cities. What was that called?
Sonic Highways.
Sonic Highways. Mm-hmm. I thought there was some good stuff on there, but overall,
that was mostly a snooze. I kind of snoozed out on that one.
I thought the documentary series was better than the record.
Let me tell you guys, and I know that you've heard me say this, but I just want to put this back into the podcast. You got to check out Echo in the Canyon, and you got to check out the soundtrack. It has become my favorite record of the year.
I watched the I told you I watched it.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Did you dig it?
I loved it.
Isn't it amazing?
What it also made me want to do is kind of start diving into the other artists that Jacob Dylan brought in. Like, I've never gotten into Regina Spektor's stuff.
Oh, man, Regina Spektor is amazing.
Other than her song that they used for the theme song for Orange is the New Black, I don't really know her music.
You never got into Cat Power?
I know Cat Power.
Okay.
But I've never really gotten into it.
Oh, dude, I'm a huge Cat Power fan.
But there was some great guests. Fiona Apple was awesome in it.
Dude, she's killer in it. Beck is great in it.
Everybody. I mean, and it's such a really well done documentary. And I've always been a huge Wallflowers Jacob Dylan fan. So when you told me about it, I was instantly in.
You guys out there in Metal Every Podcast land, and I know it's not metal, bro. But you got to go check it out, for real. Okay, here's the deal. We got, go leave us a positive review on iTunes. We're going to blow through some of this housekeeping stuff so we can get into this. Playboy! Ooh. If you haven't left a review, goddamn it, just go do it.
It's so easy. My goodness.
Now, if you really dig the show, you can get on the ride at the Patreon level. You're going to hear a whole commercial that Ethan and I lovingly made for you, so we don't have to talk about it every time we do an episode.
Honey, please, it's a gorgeous commercial.
Please, honey, please. What I did was I dressed up the commercial in the most beautiful accoutrements.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Lucius listens to it all the time.
Well, I showed my dog I'd show my dog Lucius, and I show your dog Valentino everything they get to see first.
They get to. It's like an approval system. We give it to the dogs and see if they like it.
And then what is it? 1 bark for yes, 2 barks for no?
Correct.
Right.
If it's a bark and a tail wag, oh God, honey, please. That's going to skyrocket in the podcast world.
Sometimes I would hate to embarrass my sweet little Lucius dog, but sometimes he's so excited the little pee-pee comes out.
Just a little bit, though.
Just a little bit, though.
Easy to clean up.
He's house-trained, well-kempt.
Well verklempt.
Well, I kept him well verklempt because we lived in Yonkers for decades.
It's been a while since we heard from the Joyces.
The patrons get all sorts of cool, crazy, funky shit. We give away gifts and tickets to shows. We gave away tickets to S&M2, for example. What they get at bare minimum, though, is a shout-out on the show because we're so grateful for them. So, Ethan, you want to read these people's names out?
I would love to. We have Rob Anderton, Zachary Burkhalter, and Bobby Alford.
All right, guys. You know what? You're the true heroes of Metal Up Your Podcast. You're the true hero.
Hero comes along.
We're on all the socials. I guess I'll have to just name them for you. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, blah, 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 whatever. Just look up Metal Up Your Podcast. I don't know what our various handles are. You can go to metalupyourpodcast.com and buy T-shirts. You can buy our Cover Our World Blackened EPs. Let's say you don't want to become a patron, but you do want to support the show and you want something in return. Well, we've made these cover EPs that are for sale on our website. They're $5.98.
$5.98, yeah.
So that's just a quick way to give $5 to the show, support the show. We've really tried to keep this show ad-free, and I think we're going to basically accomplish that, except for maybe 1 or 2 surprises that might be around the corner, but that are very Metallica related.
Yeah. We're not going to all of a sudden, you're not going to start an episode and it's going to be like, welcome to Your Podcast, episode 5876, sponsored by Casper Mattresses.
Exactly.
Are you a metalhead that doesn't have an easy time sleeping at night? Check out Casper.
The only 2 sponsors that we've really had, well, we've had Tone Tubby, so we have had Tone Tubby up on this biatch.
Yeah.
So we should say thank you to Jonathan. But 2 companies that I just fully believe in: Weigh Your Crap Toilet, Newpern.
Little, yellow, different.
So that's where you can find all of our shit. We get emails all week. We respond to them. We love hearing from the Metal Up Your Podcast family. It's a good opportunity to dip in, hear some feedback on some episodes. They're not all about kissing our ass. Sometimes these guys ask us questions, and gals, I should say. And it just sparks interesting conversation about Metallica. We read 5 a week. This week we're going to read 6.
Ooh, you're welcome.
Because we got several that were pertinent to our last episode on the Napster controversy. So we're going to slippity slide on into those in what we like to call the email corner. Muchly does it please me to read the emails in the email corner.
Through the portal.
Cometh through thine portals into thine email corner, yes.
Through the portal I shall read the first email. Yes. Our first email is from Lou Delia. What's up, guys? I'm so pumped for the Napster episode. I was 100% on Metallica's side back in 2000. I even did a current events report for school on it in my senior year. That's cool. As always, thanks for all you guys do. The show's been amazing these past few episodes, and I can't wait to hear Paul. Thanks, Lou, from Parsippany, New Jersey.
All right. Thanks, Lou. Appreciate that. Nicole Williams writes in, hey, guys. First, I wanted to say that I can totally empathize with 17-year-old Clint. I could picture myself at that Atlanta show without James with my arms crossed, mad at the world for being forced to watch Korn or Kid Rock in place of Metallica. Hell, I saw 2003's Summer Sanitarium tour, and when Limp Bizkit played their version of Sanitarium, I wanted nothing to do with that travesty. That is exactly how I felt. I had to sit and watch Lars Ulrich and Kirk Hammett and Jason Newsted play American Badass after they played Sad But True with Kid Rock on vocals. Ooh, it was rough.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It was rough, dude. It would honestly, in all fairness, it would be rough today. I would just have a better attitude.
Sure.
I don't like those bands still.
Yeah, same.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm not trying to see Korn play one. I'm good. Korn can be in Kornland being Korn.
Yeah.
I just hated that those two worlds merged
Collided.
so much. She goes on to say, also, I got a message from my friend Sasha tonight saying to book my flight for the Metal Up Your Podcast party on January 12th. So I did.
Amazing.
Then I turned on the podcast and heard that it's tentatively scheduled for the 12th. Anything you can do to hold that date would be greatly appreciated. Cheers, Nicole. So it sounds like Nicole's already coming no matter what. So if the party doesn't happen, I guess she'll just crash with you and Callie.
Hey, perfect. Yeah, we got a spare bedroom. You can sleep with our dogs. And
it's looking pretty tight that we're going to be doing January 12th.
Yeah. There's some up in the air tour date questions. But in general.
Well, and here's the deal.
Sunday's usually good for us.
And it's a Sunday evening. It's going to be at the Cobra in East Nashville. If you've heard of our parties but never been, they're super fun. We celebrate the podcast. A bunch of fans are going to be coming, like Nicole. I can't remember where Nicole lives, but she's obviously flying in.
New Jersey.
We're all here on the great planet New Jersey.
Right.
I know Sasha lives in Colorado, so she's coming from Colorado, and we've had people come from all over the country to those parties.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that people are willing to do that. I mean, obviously last year with Metallica playing the night after our party, that didn't hurt. But I'm sure we'll have a bunch of other people driving in, maybe old Metalliclaws himself, Chris Urgis.
Oh, Chris is definitely coming.
Yeah.
I've already talked to Chris about
Sobex.
it. I don't know. I haven't heard from them, but it's going to be a good time. So mark your calendars, January 12th. If you're looking into Airbnbs and you're looking into flying, you should probably do that sooner than later to save some dough.
Right. Look at your Airbnbs in East Nashville. Because Metallica is not playing the next night, Airbnbs will be a lot easier to get on January 12th. I know it's tough for some people to find stuff close by. But yeah, look in the East Nashville area for Airbnbs. There'll be a quick Uber Lyft ride to the bar.
It's going to be a good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing Nicole.
I'm looking forward to eating someone's burrito.
I hope that we won't have Burrito Gate version 2.0 this year. I hope that I can just keep it together and not do something stupid.
Well, we'll see.
I make no promises.
I make no promises for you.
I kept it pretty tight and right until the very end.
Well, at the very end, you can, just pop that cork off and go nuts.
I did not wait until the very end the first year, so...
True. That will live on forever.
Okay.
Our next email is from Jared Mason. He says, new fan, love the show. I'm a few years behind on the show and new to podcasts in general. I recently felt like listening to dialogue as opposed to music, so I searched Metallica podcasts on Spotify and discovered your show.
So Spotify's good for something.
It helped us a little bit. Luckily, although I didn't particularly know what I was looking for, Metal Up Your Podcast is exactly what I wanted.
Nice.
Pleases me. I just want to say thanks for doing the show. It is truly awesome to listen to, as Metallica is a subject that continues to get me excited as I get older. Please keep up the awesome show. I'm playing catch up and enjoying every second. You guys rock.
Thank you,
Jared.
Thank you, Jared. I
Thanks,
appreciate
buddy.
that. Thanks for hopping on the ride. I think you're going to have a good time. We're glad to have you. Matt Kerr writes, hey, guys, thanks for another great episode. I wanted to comment on the Napster debacle. As I recall it, I really had two issues with the way it was handled. First of all, was Metallica's failure to address clearly how Napster was affecting them in a way that was bootleg trading was not. Lars's quote, notwithstanding, I personally didn't see the difference. Given the choice between a soundboard recording of a concert or a digital copy of the Black Album, I would have chosen the concert recording. Metallica wasn't getting my money under either scenario. Now that it's 2019, I can understand Lars's argument, but at the time, I was unclear why he turned a blind eye to the bootleg industry but not peer-to-peer trading. Well, I got to just take issue with that because Lars made it pretty clear.
I think so, yeah.
Going through all the quotes and going through everything he labored to say and articulate, I don't think that the misunderstanding was on his part. In terms of, he parsed out the difference. Look, if you're a kid with a Maxwell XT, whatever, C 90-minute cassette tape, making a copy of Kill 'Em All is not the same as 12 million people sharing the album Kill 'Em All in perfect digital masters without any degradation to the sound quality.
The amount of people actually bootlegging, making copies of tapes and stuff, way less than 12 million people in 48 hours.
And I just feel like was clearly addressed. Anyway, so,
I think so.
But fair enough, Matt. All right, I hear what you're saying. I'm picking up what you're putting
I
on.
hear
Matt.
you.
Matt goes on to say, secondly, a lot of what I downloaded through peer-to-peer platforms were rarities and recordings not available in this country. This was not specific to Metallica. I can remember traveling in Europe in the early 2000s and buying CD singles not available in the U.S., at least not at most record stores. In many cases, the peer-to-peer platform was the first time I knew that something even existed at all. Almost heard that in the medieval guy. That was the first time I knew that something even existed at all.
Yes.
The music industry didn't have a backup plan to offer that to me at a reasonable price, and it was several years before the iTunes store began to close that gap. It felt like the industry was holding some music for ransom, which was within their rights, but not something that sits well with consumers. I mean, that's fair enough too, but just because record labels weren't making that song available doesn't mean you can steal it.
Sure, yeah.
I get it. I mean, I would read or hear about weird demos of the first A Perfect Circle record, and you could hear a version of Billy Howardell singing Orestes instead of Maynard.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to go steal that from someone just because I really want to hear it and I know it exists, and it's on some weird Japanese version of the vinyl.
Right, exactly.
You just had to not hear it.
Or just wait in case it came out on something else. I mean, I'm guilty of doing peer-to-peer stuff as well. I mean, and I'm kind of with Matt on this one where I would look for B-sides and rarities and things that just were never on CD or record. That was, kind of my deal. And then when the Metallica thing happened, I was kind of like, I probably shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
So I kind of withdrew.
Right.
I mean, I'm such an awesome person for doing that.
You know what the thing is, other than that quality of yours?
What's that?
Humility.
Well, humility is my best quality.
Modesty.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it makes up for not having played the Ryman. But
I'm going to have to hard disagree on that.
Okay. It's a hard no from you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, playing the Ryman is just sort of this, I don't know, massive rite of passage for any seasoned professional musician. No mere modesty or humility or piety will ever replace what it feels like to perform legitimately. I want to underscore legitimately on that stage in front of a paying crowd. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no rarity or B-side I could download that would probably give me the feeling of playing the Ryman, but hopefully one day I'll have that feeling.
No, I mean, what you could do is you could download a lot of live performances from the Ryman, but in my opinion, that would only sort of entrench you in the sadness more.
Got it. Okay, I would kick myself while I'm down.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I just imagine you looking at a Playboy, listening to a compilation of Ryman performances, and punching yourself in your own balls. That's my image.
It's now my image.
I appreciate your input, Matt. Thank you for writing.
For sure. Next email is from Sean Gorman. My own personal opinion with regards to the whole Napster versus Metallica battle is that two things can be true at once. Lars always maintained that his music is his property and he should be allowed to distribute that property as he sees fit, which is true. Napster always maintained that they never stole anything and were simply providing the means for people to share their music, which is also true. So I think the whole thing is a bit of a push. In many ways, they were both right. In hindsight, it seems that the technology of the internet simply moved faster than the technologies of the law, and we're still trying to figure that out in 2019, which is true. I mean, I think Napster was still, it's kind of like guilty by association kind of thing.
Sure.
Like Napster knew what was going on.
They were definitely not right.
Right. That's
why they lost the lawsuit.
That's what I gather from it. I mean, it's like, hey, we're not uploading these songs. That doesn't mean you're not involved in this.
Listen, and that's what the impetus was for them handing the names over, which became such a PR nightmare for Metallica. The thing is, when they asked Metallica to provide the names, they could have provided those names.
Right.
They dubiously said, we can't tell who these people are, but if you can figure it out, we'll suspend their accounts. Ha ha ha, that's impossible.
Yeah.
And then Metallica did do that, and then they had to suspend those accounts.
Right.
They knew they were wrong.
Oh, they did, yeah.
The internal documents that came out in the recording industry case against Napster revealed that executives at Napster knew that they were providing pirated material and that there was a huge mandate company-wide to remain ignorant to individual users' ISP addresses and their names.
Yeah.
That's shady.
Napster,
That's not right. They weren't providing the files,
right,
but they were providing the centralized mechanism that people were using to deal in the piracy of intellectual property.
Napster's not shooting the gun, but they're providing the gun, fully loaded.
They're providing the gun, and they're providing the arena that people shoot themselves in.
Yeah.
No one ever accused Napster of providing the songs that were being stolen.
Yeah.
They provided the vehicle, and if you provide that vehicle, you're out.
Right.
If you have a balloon of heroin in your hiney and you're coming from Juarez, you will go to jail.
But it's not my heroin.
I'm just the mule. We end our lives as mules.
In Juarez.
I feel like we're being so contentious with our people writing in. I don't want to discourage anyone from writing in.
No. This is just, if listen, if Matt or Sean were here, we would have the same discussion. It's a little tough when we're reading these off a piece of paper and talking to microphones. We love you guys. We love that you're supporting the show and that you write in stuff. This is just our side of the discussion.
All right, our last email is from longtime listener Nick Roller, who writes in, Dear Clint, Ethan, and Paul!
Oh, thank you.
The latest episode was great. I have to give massive kudos to Clint for his research and the way everything was presented. The legal factors at play were highlighted and presented in a clear, understandable way. Nice work. Thank you, Nick, who himself is a lawyer.
That's right.
He says, I wanted to give my perspective as one of the youngest generation to experience Napster. I was 11 when my mom, who was 27, put it on the family computer. Fittingly, the first file I downloaded was Adam Sandler's masterpiece, Piece of Shit Car. I will say that in the minds of myself and my friends, we never gave a thought to the idea that what we were doing was illegal or even wrong. It was very much the idea of, but it's cool. Everyone I know has it, so it must be okay. I can say as a kid that age, downloading did play a huge role in my development as a music lover. Peer-to-peer gave me a way to explore under the nose of my parents. How else was a kid in a town of 2,500 going to hear this Eminem guy everyone's talking about? As time went on, downloading became central to my exploration of music. I can name a dozen artists off the top of my head that I read about in a magazine, downloaded a handful of songs, and ended up buying the band's entire discography. The first copies of Metallica songs that I fell in love with were illegal copies. I have no illusion about the fact that I was in the minority of users, and I do believe Lars was right. I always have. It's been and continues to be a painful growing process, but I'm confident the middle class of musicians will return stronger. Hunger breeds innovation. Bands are learning to take advantage of the model. What's done is done. All we can do as lovers of art is support however we can and remain optimistic that things will work together for the best. Thanks, Nick.
What a well-drafted email, Nick.
What a beautiful writer he is.
He's like a lawyer.
I think I agree with him. The grumpy part of me today is like, well, it's a little bit harder to see it that way when it's your industry and you're actually feeling the effects of it. And he talks about the middle class coming back stronger than ever. I'm not sure that's happening.
Yeah, that's a little tough. I mean, with the
I wanted to read an excerpt from a So What interview Lars did about Napster. He specifically mentions what Nick just referred to as the middle class, right? And Lars fucking nails this, and this is something we didn't even mention in our Napster episode.
Okay.
He says, look, it cost Metallica $1 million to make a record. Forgetting about what it does for Lars, James, Kirk, and Jason in terms of time, there's a physical cost in that. It costs us money. We employ dozens of people. We hire a studio, which is a small business that profits from us making a record there. We hire tape operators. We hire assistants. We hire runners. We hire recording engineers. The whole livelihood depends on us making records. So the minute you make all that music available for free, he says, forget about Lars, James, Kirk, and Jason. We're fine. We're set up for life. Thank you very much. But you're going to put that studio out of business. You're going to put that recording engineer out of business. Basically, there's an industry here that's not just about the fat cats that run the record companies on the 52nd floor. That's what people also have a tendency to overlook. And they have a tendency to forget about how many people this really affects. It affects everybody who works at Tower Records, which doesn't exist anymore, by the way.
Yep.
The road is littered with a lot of small record store owners, especially around college campuses, who are complaining about how their sales are down. So, all right, I mean, the middle class is going to come back. Okay, maybe. I don't know how yet.
I don't either. I mean, I would love to be able to see in the future on the other side of streaming, or is streaming just going to be the norm forever? I just can't imagine. I mean, I love that vinyl has made this, resurgence in the last, 10 to 15 years. But with everything being digital, especially the next generation, that's all they're going to know is digital and streaming.
Well, and this is a problem happening in the entire workforce. This is why universal income is becoming so important, is because we're moving so fast into a future in which robots will do most of people's jobs. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be a lot of people who can't find work.
Right.
What are we going to do about that as a society?
Then it's just going to be like Terminator. The robots are going to take over and look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're going to have to find Linda Hamilton.
Mm-hmm. We're going to find the
Edward Furlong.
Edward Furlong,
yeah,
wherever he is. Well, look, we really do love hearing from you guys. Even if we disagree with you, you can write in metalupyourpodcastshow@gmail.com. Even if we don't read it on the show, we read it privately. We usually respond to all of them. And let's get into this Playboy interview.
Please.
I'm horny.
Whoa. Hey everyone, this is Ethan and Clint. We're here to tell you about supporting the show via Patreon.
That's right. Every week, Ethan and I work hard to bring you the best Metallica content possible. If you think the show has value, consider supporting us on a financial level at Patreon.
For $5 a month, or the price of 2 cups of coffee, you can ensure that Metal Up Your Podcast continues to grow in quality and content. But that's not all.
In addition to being able to help sleep at night for supporting your favorite podcast, we've also come up with incentives to say thank you that are exclusively available to patrons. For example, for a pledge of $5 or more, you immediately get free downloads of every Cover Our World Blackened EP.
Ticket giveaways for shows like S&M 2 and Slain Castle.
Box sets, rare vinyl, Metallica memorabilia like S&M 2 guitar picks.
Email priority, meaning we'll read your email first on the show with a chance to ask guests like Hailstorm, Jay Weinberg of Slipknot, and Metallica Row Crew your very own questions.
And the opportunity to come on the show as a guest for our Metal Tales bonus episodes, in which you can tell us all about any Metallica show you've been to in the past.
All this and more for becoming a patron and supporting Metal Up Your Podcast.
We couldn't do this show without you, and to everyone on the ride with us, we sincerely thank you. Peace.
Adios.
All right, so what I've done is I've printed this out. Ethan and I both have copies. Now, hopefully you at home have read through it. In fact, if you haven't, and you're not driving with your kid in the car, maybe hit pause and go check this interview out, because we're skipping a lot of it. A lot of it's kind of basic interview shit.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like it's on Playboy.com. You have to have a subscription. I just Google searched it. Metallica Playboy interview was the first thing that came up on some archive site.
So again, as we mentioned before, the whole point of this is because it contains a lot of interesting. I mean, I don't think they would normally have ever said some of this stuff. A lot of what came out in this interview is because they weren't together.
Right.
James is more likely to take a shot at Lars if they're in different rooms than if they're together.
Absolutely. I'd be curious to see how different this interview came out if they were all being interviewed at the same time. I mean, maybe for the journalist doing this, he thought like this would be a good idea. Well, they also weren't really hanging out much at this time too.
No,
they were on a bit of a hiatus. So.
Lars has referred to this time as a black hole. He says basically the makeup shows, that one of which I saw for when James hurt his back skiing, the aforementioned show that Nicole mentioned in the emails about watching Korn and Kid Rock and shit. They did 3 makeup shows. I went to one of those in Atlanta at Lakewood Amphitheater. In between that and them making the classic albums for Black Album and then the VH1 gig, those are the only 2 times they saw each other in from the summer to the end of the year.
Yeah.
So this is a bunch of time that I think old Newsted was making up his mind. And then
for sure.
He said in that interview we heard 2 episodes ago that he knew the moment he was quitting Metallica was at that classic albums when James basically put the kibosh on Echobrain.
Yeah.
And then they didn't see each other, and then they do the VH1 gig.
Yeah.
And then dude, this So What book, you guys got to get this So What book.
Good.
It's a compilation of So What magazines. They go into a lot of detail about that gig. So apparently they got the call from Q Prime. They got the offer to play that VH1 thing.
Yeah.
Everyone said yes to it except Jason. Jason said, no, I don't want to do it. And Lars said that was the first time that had ever happened. So he said he had to call Jason himself and convince Jason to do it. He said, once I got on the phone with Jason, he was cool.
Yeah.
He said Jason showed up separately, didn't sit with them, didn't talk to them, and that right after that performance, he left the whole venue and split.
Just split.
Which I guess was really unusual and really hurt James's and Lars's feelings.
Well, and I mean, also for Jason being so well known as like the fan-friendly guy,
Right.
you know, the guy that really, at certain points in the band's history, was kind of the glue. You know, I mean, so yeah, very odd for Jason to do that, not knowing he was about to quit the band.
And we're going to do this whole deep dive on Jason's departure from the band. I don't want to give away too much of that stuff, but it's just so one of the reasons I wanted to do this Playboy episode with the Napster episode with the year 2000 in the year 2000 is because all of this is woven together like a wonderful quilt.
A wonderful warm quilt you could wrap around yourself.
With a Playboy bunny on it.
Speaking of not giving too much away for the Jason departing episode, he quit the band.
Spoiler alert.
He quit the
18
band.
years later. What the fuck doesn't anyone he quit the fucking band?
That was a good Lars.
Thank you. So before the interview begins, we kind of get this little blurb from Playboy that kind of sets it up. I'm going to read a few things from that. It says, we sent freelance writer Rob Tannenbaum to interview the last of the big rock bands. He found that although the band members were out of touch with one another during the hiatus, they were not out of one another's minds. He says, I wasn't surprised that Jason Newsted quit Metallica. Just 2 months earlier, I'd spent a day with each of the four, and I've never seen a band so quarrelsome and fractious. Most of the barbs were cloaked in humor. Newsted mocked Hetfield's singing, Hetfield mocked Ulrich's drumming, and Ulrich, whom I interviewed last, responded to several of Hetfield's quotes with scorn.
Ooh.
But genuine tension was evident in these interviews. Each talked about his need for solitude. Paradoxically, this is a band of loners, and the conflict between unity and individuality was pretty clear. So, Kirk Hammett at the time, who was 38, Hetfield was 37, Lars was 37, and Newsted 38. They're all about the same age. That's interesting. So they interviewed Hetfield in his house. They interviewed Jason in a studio in Marin County. I think Kirk was also at his house, and Lars was in New York. So another thing that's interesting about all of this, and not to dive too much into their personal lives, but just for some context, Lars was kind of in the middle of getting divorced from his wife.
Right, and he was kind of holed up in New York.
Right. So he's holed up in New York dealing with, and I've been through a divorce, not with kids or anything, but it's so fucking awful.
Yeah, well, especially on that kind of level where there's a lot of money involved.
Millions of dollars. And so that's going to play a part in, because Lars is kind of the problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big instigator of problems, but he's also the let's fucking figure this out guy.
Yeah.
I wonder, if he had been a little more emotionally available instead of going through a divorce, if he might have been more of a mediator and more of a, look, talking to James and Jason, you guys need to figure this shit out.
Yeah.
But instead, kind of as the chess game we can see in 2020, he's a little bit out of the picture because he's preoccupied.
Right.
Okay, so the most unhappy Metallican was Jason Newsted, who I met in the Marin County recording studio. He said he was straining at Hetfield's restrictions, which kept him from releasing a solo album. It says, Newsted gradually admitted that he felt almost stifled in Metallica. But then he says, which this is, you mentioned this earlier,
yeah,
I would not leave Metallica for another band, which we're like, oh, that's good.
Good news.
He's not going to leave it for Echobrain. He says, if I happened to choose that path, I would do it to live my life, not depart to play in any other band. So he's already kind of setting up this, when I leave,
yeah,
I don't want anyone to say it was because I wanted to be an Echobrain.
Yeah.
I want it to be because I needed to live my life. And I felt like the Echobrain stifling was just a symptom of a bigger problem with James and control. So that's one of the things you can kind of tease out of this that none of them knew.
Yeah, none of them knew, but he's already, like I said earlier, he's already kind of dropping these little hints.
It says, a source within the Metallica camp told me that Newsted is not 100% healthy and has been playing in pain. The bassist also told Playboy he would quit when the day comes that I cannot perform with his accustomed ferocity. And I've seen him say that too, like, I'm the guy out there that gives it 100%. The day that I can't deliver that, I'm not going to go out like that.
Yeah, he's not just. He even said at some point, "I'm not just going to stand there on stage and just play."
Right.
I mean, because as you know, I mean, we've all watched hundreds of Metallica performances. I mean, Jason was like 110% every night.
I don't know why he felt such a fidelity to that idea, though. It's like, dude, you're all going to get older. You're not going to be able to do what you did in your 20s. Mm-hmm. I wonder why he made that such a sticking point of like, if I can't headbang and thrash and give myself whiplash, which he did, the way that I did when I was 23, I don't want to go out like that. It's like, well,
it's weird because, I mean, obviously, we saw many Metallica shows on this last tour. And yeah, I mean, Hetfield isn't moving his body like he did on, in 1989.
Moving that
body, hey. But everyone gets older. You naturally adjust to.
Yeah, it just strikes me as a strange thing to say.
I mean, and that was one of the big things when he quit was like physical damage.
Yeah.
So
right.
And maybe there was something more serious than
playing in pain, and he talks about playing those big, heavy ESP basses. Mm-hmm. I mean, that all does take a toll. I mean, I know that a lot of people that played Les Pauls their whole careers have like shoulder damage.
Yeah, I mean, but also, obviously, it was much deeper rooted than that. I think because it's like, dude, play lighter basses. You get free basses. Have ESP make you one with the lighter wood. Things like that, I think, that happens a lot of times when band members are about to quit a band or hinting about it. You try to find all these other reasons other than the core reason. It's the same with breaking up with somebody. It's like,
and I get it too.
Dance around the subject a little bit.
I get that too. I mean, yeah, it's like anything that or a job you want to leave or whatever. Mm-hmm. You start to amass your column, your pros and your anti columns, and so after that blurb, this is when the interview starts properly. Now, it is written in a way where you do feel like they're in the same room, which I think was a clever journalistic mechanism that ye old Playboy guy used. So the first question is to Lars, as you spent much of last year fighting Napster, now that it's gone into business with BMG and it's changing from a free service to a pay service, is the threat over or will a similar site pop up? And Lars says there are all sorts of mini Napsters out there. He says it's never going to go away, but I think it can get to a point where it becomes sort of a nuisance comparable to, say, bootlegging and piracy. And he's asked, what did you accomplish by going after Napster? Lars says, what we've accomplished most is to bring an awareness to the American public. It turned into the first big issue of the 21st century. My first hot take, if you will, is like, that's a very Lars-ish, like, I started the first, like, legitimate conversation of the 21st century.
Right.
But he may be right. I mean,
but it was a big deal. I mean, this one event that we covered on our last episode was the beginning of a snowball effect for the next 15, 20 years of the state of our industry.
Absolutely.
I mean, and I'm sure if this dude didn't invent Napster, something else would have come along. Eventually.
Totally. There's a really great correspondence of letters between Sigmund Freud and Albert Einstein called Why War?
It's about Napster.
The 1920s, they sort of precipitated Napster.
Amazing.
No, but it's Einstein was working on the A-bomb.
Yeah.
And Sigmund Freud is like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Why would you go to the States and work on a destructive piece of technology that is going to change the world forever? And Albert Einstein was like, someone's going to make this technology.
Right.
So do we want it to be scientists who are pro-peace, or do we want it to be an evil person?
Yeah.
I recommend anyone reading that correspondence to the greatest German minds of all time, having this great sparring dialogue about why would you do that? Of course, someone would have done it.
Somebody would have eventually, especially in regards to Napster and how fast technology had been moving at this point. Someone's going to come up with some kind of peer-to-peer sharing thing or torrenting, whatever it might be.
It's like anything when you look back at history. We have the benefit and the hindsight of 2020. It would have been great if whoever developed it also developed it in conjunction with more permission from artists, more of a desire to reform copyright laws.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, well, it's out in the wild. It's like Paul said in the last episode about like, well, the toothpaste is out of the tube.
Yeah.
That's such an unfortunate part of the whole saga.
It is, yeah.
Hetfield, when asked about Napster, says, I think Napster won the press war. It hurt the fans' perception of us. They see Metallica as some big bad guys who wanted to take their free stuff away. I like playing music because it's a good living and I get satisfaction from it, but I can't feed my family with satisfaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is true. It's just those kinds of statements land flat with your average middle class or lower middle class consumer.
Coming from a mega rich band like Metallica, I get the point, obviously, but like, you know, that's why I wish there was almost more emphasis on the middle class of musicians and
instead of
and stuff.
But the thing is, I think Lars did try to do that.
He did try to do that.
He tried to say, "Look, we're rich. This isn't about us getting rich.
Yeah,
this is about the future." And maybe he was worried about the future of his wealth, but I think he had right to be. Mm-hmm. And it's like Gene Simmons said: no one gets to decide how rich they are. You can't just steal from rich people because you've decided they're rich enough to steal from.
Right.
That's just. How's that going to play into a moral argument?
Mm-hmm, totally.
I think, look, I'm not rich. I think the rich should be taxed more, and I think that wealthy people have a responsibility to bring a balance to society. Mm-hmm. But I don't think this is that case.
Right. No. And that's one thing that is
Metallica
always
doesn't have to
bugged
start
me.
giving their records away to do that.
Well, correct. Yeah. But I hate that, you know, a lot of stuff in the press back then, it focused way too much on Metallica sues fans, or, you know, they're delivering all these names. All that stuff got so much more headline press than what the real issue was and what Lars was actually fighting for.
The Playboy interviewer asks, why did Lars become the band's spokesperson against Napster? And James responds, my wife and I were giving birth to a second child, and family's number one. We're number one.
Number one.
Except for when except for when you're hunting for bears in Russia.
Right.
Ooh, yikes. He says, so Lars had to run with the torch, and there were a few bad moves. He says, Lars can get really mouthy and be a snotty-nosed kid at times. I cringed at certain interviews. I'm like, ooh. This is when you see some of the first barbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lars can be a really mouthy and be a snotty-nosed kid at times. I'm like, shit.
Damn.
Lars says, I said some things that were borderline silly when Limp Bizkit embraced Napster and took $2 million to play a quote-unquote free tour. I said it was bullshit. He says, I know a lot of people hate Fred Durst, but I think he's really talented. Me and Fred kissed and made up. When I open my mouth, most of the time something somewhat eloquent comes out, and once in a while I talk a bunch of shit. I'm aware of that. Because I thought about that when I was reading about him going after Fred Durst, because they toured with Limp Bizkit in 2003.
Right, yeah.
So obviously they had to figure that conflict out.
Yeah, and it becoming friend. I mean, that was one of those things that was just like a dig from Fred Durst in the press to Metallica. Then Metallica's like, this free tour you're doing and trashing us, you're actually getting paid $2 million for it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
great that they patched things up and they were able to go on tour together and stuff. I personally wouldn't want to watch that tour, but not a big Bizkit fan.
Playboy asked, what sort of things did the fans say to your face? And Hetfield talks about getting into it with fans at like meet and greets. He said he made some girl cry. Lars says, if you'd stop being a Metallica fan because I won't give you my music for free, then fuck you. I don't want you to be a Metallica fan.
That's as direct as you can get right there.
Which, you know, that's got some teeth in it, but kind of hard to argue with it.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. If I was playing a show here in Nashville and some dude came up and was like, man, I loved your set. It was awesome. Can I have every piece of your merch for free? Like, right. No, you can't. Well, I'm not going to listen to your music. Okay, good.
Right.
Go away then.
Right. I guess what was so interesting about this new frontier of digital media, and there being, as Nick said, and as some of our emailers wrote in earlier, the moral confusion about, well, it's easy to steal this. Everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Is that so many people, the collective consciousness was doing it instead of just one jerk at the merch stand,
right?
Who's clearly not in the majority. Mm-hmm. Most people who come to your merch stand understand they have to buy it,
right?
But I mean, I have people at almost every show that want me to give them like my hat or a piece of my clothing or something.
Yeah, it's weird.
And I've seen people get truly, truly grumpy when I'm like, no.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's mine.
Did I tell you about the one guy who took my hat off and put it on his own head?
Oh Lord!
He said, "Can I wear your hat?" Oh, first he asked for the hat. And I said, no, I'm not going to give you my hat. He's like, well, can I wear it for the picture? And I said, no, let's just take the picture. We're taking the picture. And he takes it off my head and puts it on his head right before his wife snapped the picture. Oh, you motherfucker.
I've had that kind of stuff happen in the past. It's super annoying.
Kirk Hammett weighs in for the first time we hear from Kirk. He says, I'm still shocked at the reaction people have. I thought it was so obvious. People are taking our music when they're not supposed to, and we want to stop them. Points for Kirk for laying it out pretty succinctly there.
There you go. Old Kirky Poo.
Oh, little Kirky.
Love it.
What did we used to call him? The Dainty Orphan?
Oh, was it the Dainty Orphan?
That was from 700 years ago.
Yeah. God, what was that, in 73, I think? Our first episode dropped.
Playboy says, maybe you were right on the merits, speaking of the Napster debacle, but it's hard for people to sympathize with the rich. Well, that's something you and I were just talking about.
Right.
Lars says, understand 80 million records later, I don't know what the fuck to do with all the money I have. So now can we talk about what the real issue is? I want to choose what happens to my music. It's pretty clear that the future is selling your music online, but common sense would tell you that you cannot do that if the guy next door is giving it away for free. Again, logic.
He sees the future, too.
I see the future.
I see the future through the portal of time. I see that the music sales will be, yes, on the internet.
Pleases me to put all music on the internet. Yes, I just want to have artistic control of it.
Is that too much to ask thee?
I guess it's just all natural that they're going to camp out in Napster world for a bit. I'm going to try to skip through some of that because that's nothing we didn't cover in excruciating detail in the last episode. Oh, Playboy says, were you surprised when you got booed on stage last September at the VMAs, which is when they did I Disappear?
Yeah.
Lars says, I was unaware of it while I was up there, to which the interviewer said, that's surprising because you looked really uncomfortable. Kind of thumbing Lars on that.
Yeah.
He says, I was kind of drunk. It was the worst awards show, hands down, that I've ever been to. And he talks about how he left early and went out to dinner with some friends. Playboy asked, when Napster creator Sean Fanning came out in the Metallica shirt, they cut to you in the audience and you looked aghast. So
I remember this.
I remember it too. And Lars says it was all planned.
Yeah, and that's what I didn't know until reading this interview.
Well, so I guess they were going to, Lars was going to give Sean Fanning an award.
Yeah.
And I guess at the last minute, Napster's lawyers pulled the plug. They were still in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Because they thought Lars was going to say something. They thought that Lars was going to do something kind of inflammatory or whatever. So I guess at the last minute, the dude came out wearing a Napster shirt, and Lars was like going to pretend to be sleeping because he was so bored.
Yeah.
But Lars...
It was all planned out.
It was all planned out. It's all showbiz, baby.
Yeah, it's all showbiz, baby.
Hey, kid. Hey, kid. Come on in here, kid.
Hey, you see?
See?
Before the show, you see, Lars and Sean, they got together, right? And what happened was he said, hey, why don't you wear a Metallica shirt on stage and I'll act like I'm asleep, you see?
Yeah, see? Yeah, everyone makes $1 million, see?
Yeah, boss, sounds good.
Playboy says, now that you're superstars, not only on MTV, but also on VH1, it's easy to forget how unpopular you were at first. I thought this was an interesting pivot into... I mean, 99 and 2000 are probably the most bloated Metallica ever got.
Yeah.
Because even when they were on the Black Album, which was as commercial as they were, they kind of still had the punk rock aesthetic.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I think they still were wearing the shell of their early days.
I mean, God, watch footage from that tour. They're still in like an all black, super mean looking. Like it wasn't like it wasn't like going from Injustice for All to Load.
It's really post Black Album, kind of Load through 2000, through this era, 2001, where they were like rock stars.
Yes,
with the fucking short hair and the sunglasses and wearing leather. And they're famous. They've been famous and rich for like 10 years now. That's going to change anybody. But I thought this was interesting. Hetfield says, when Lars and I hooked up, we liked the kind of music that was not accepted, especially in L.A. We were fast and heavy. Everything about L.A. was short, catchy songs, Motley Crue, Rat, Van Halen, and you had to have the look. The only look we had was ugly.
Ugly.
Which I never tire of asking my wife. I'm like, do you think the Metallica guys are attractive? It's no across the board 100%.
Yeah.
But I'll pull up different eras.
She's like, okay.
I'm like, what about James? Like, what about James in the I Disappear video? No, she there's no era of Metallica where she likes those guys. No.
Okay, fair enough.
Have you ever done that with Callie?
Not really, no. Maybe I'll start.
I mean, it doesn't sound like a totally healthy preoccupation of mine to constantly ask my wife if dudes are attractive.
Hey, so what do you think of Marty Freeman? But like 1991.
Well, I mean, I know
that hair.
I know that there are certain eras where I find Lars attractive. I find Lars and James attractive in certain eras. Those are the only members of Metallica I find attractive.
I think
maybe Trujillo.
Trujillo
He's got long, beautiful hair. The man eats his protein.
He does, yeah. He's a handsome fellow.
And I'm not a particularly classically handsome man either. So this is no.
You stop it.
You get out of here.
You get right out.
I
of
was
here.
straight fishing for a compliment.
You get right out of your own house.
I mean, metal doesn't really attract great-looking people.
Metal's not really ever been about that. I think even when they were doing the Load Reload era and like in the fancy clothes and whatever eyeliner, it was still kind of unattractive. They were still kind of outsiders, I think.
Who's the best-looking guy in metal? Corey Taylor?
Corey Taylor's pretty hot.
He is a good-looking dude.
Good-looking dude.
I always thought Ozzy Osbourne looked pretty cool.
Back in the day?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A young Ozzy? Yummy.
I don't know. Jerry Cantrell's pretty good looking.
Yeah. So was Lane Staley.
Lane Staley's a good looking dude.
I don't really fit them in metal, though.
Yeah.
Dude, I heard a Dean Delray's interview with Jerry Cantrell. It's really good.
Is it?
Check it out. Yeah.
Okay. I shall.
Shall you? Moving back to the interview
Shall
here.
if I will.
Is reading this interview boring? I can't tell.
I'm having a good time. It's just fun discussion.
Oh, I'm having a good time, Paul.
Having a
It's
good time, Paul.
So you went kind of into a Ringo or a George there.
I'm having a good time. Paul's playing me drums.
Well, if you want me to play, I'll play it. If you want me to go home, I'll go home now. But I did think it was funny. They're talking about like the style of L.A. and they're making fun of Motley Crue and Rat. And Hetfield says, we had our battles with spandex, that's for sure. He says, but Lars wore spandex up through the Black Album tour, though he might tell you different.
Yeah.
Hetfield says, we did some shows where if our girlfriends weren't there, there'd be no one in the audience besides the bartender, which I've definitely played those shows before.
I've done those many a times.
Those are rough. You learn a lot about yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Playboy asks, where did the medieval Dungeons and Dragons theme on the early records come from? And do they have a medieval Dungeons and Dragons theme? There's Jump in the Fire.
I would say maybe with some of the artwork, if they saw the Creeping Death artwork or the Jump in the Fire artwork, yes.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know.
Well, James says Judas Priest was a band we all dug. Oh, he writes about that. Okay, then that's what you do to be metal. Then it got into more what's right about what we do. Whiplash, Hit the Light, Seek and Destroy. He says, we smashed dressing rooms just because you were supposed to. Then you get the bill and go, whoa, I didn't know Pete Townsend paid for his lamp. Come back off the tour and you hadn't made any money because you bought furniture for a bunch of promoters.
Well, isn't that true, though? Like when you're like just getting into a band, you do stuff because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Then you, over time, realize what you have to do.
I
should do.
I sort of regret to say this, but in my mid-20s, I did trash a hotel room with the band.
Did you really?
I didn't do it by myself.
Yeah.
And there were no drugs involved. We did just do it because we kind of felt like we had to.
How much was that bill?
I don't remember the actual total, but it was days later where we got a call from our manager.
Like, guys.
Well, he was like, you all owe whatever it was a piece.
Yeah.
And it was going to be like 4 show pays.
Ugh. Like, well, but we're metal.
Well, I mean, I was just in like a kind of a Pearl Jam type rock band.
Right.
It wasn't even like heavy.
You just thought this is what rock stars do, so I'm going to do it.
We'd just been doing a little bit of drinking and we were just having fun.
Yeah.
It started with someone threw the phone book out the door was just open. It was like a hotel that opened like a outside.
Yeah,
but we were up on a balcony.
Yeah.
So the first thing that went out the door was a big Yellow Pages.
Right into the pool.
And that just lit a fucking spark,
You're like, that was fun.
That felt really good. Why?
Let's do it again. Grab that frame off the wall.
Oh, shit. Hammett says, speaking of their early, lonelier days, he said, we'd drink day in and day out, hardly come up for air. People would be dropping like flies all around us. Our reputation started to precede us. I can't even remember the Kill 'Em All for One tour. We used to start drinking at 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Well, that seems kind of late for back then. For a band that eventually got nicknamed Alcoholica, like 3 or 4 doesn't seem unreasonable.
Well, I'm thinking about them on the Kill 'Em All for One tour. They were in like a conversion van. They weren't in a bus.
Yeah.
So you'd have to just deal with like sleeping.
Well, actually,
they probably started drinking at 3 or 4 because that's when they were waking up.
I was about to say they were probably waking up an hour before that or something. And then it's like, well, start drinking.
Let's see. Playboy asks, James, what did you think of Lars after the first jam session? And this is where some more mean shit gets said. Hetfield says, Lars had a pretty crappy drum kit with one cymbal. It kept falling over and we'd have to stop and he'd pick the fucking thing up. He really was not a good drummer. To this day, he's not drummer of the year. We all know that. When we were done jamming, it was, what the fuck was that? We stiffed him on the bill for the studio, too. There were so many different things about him. His mannerism, his looks, his accent, his attitude, his smell. He smelled like Denmark, I guess. They have a different view on bathing. We use soap in America.
USA.
Brutal.
Oh, man.
Well,
then Lars goes on to say, American kids, there was this sort of compulsive thing about 4 showers a day. It's like his response. This is where it gets interesting in the interview, where the interviewer is probably telling the other guys what the other dude's responses were.
Right. Oh, that's exactly what he's doing.
So it's almost, as a journalist, he's probably kind of throwing that bait out too, see what kind of reactions he can get.
Yeah.
I would love to have seen video of these interviews.
Yeah,
just to
me
see
too.
their mannerisms, their facial expressions.
Well, he talks about how most of Lars's responses to what James has said was with scorn.
Yeah. Scorn.
Whereas, like, if me and you were conducting a separate interview, if we were taking little shots like that, like, and Clint brought up once again that you have not played the Ryman, we'd be laughing.
Yes,
because there's no malice in it.
No,
we're tight. Where everything's good. When shit's sideways, though, even something that him being like, he wasn't the best drummer at the time.
Yeah.
That takes on a different kind of heaviness when you haven't talked in 6 months.
And this is also their first like extended break after like 10 constant years of being busy.
And think about it, like through the Black Album, through the 2 Load records, through S&M, through Garage Inc., multiple Grammys, millions of fans, millions of dollars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hetfield says, we ate McDonald's, he ate herring. He's from a different world. His father was famous. He was very well off, a rich only child. Spoiled. That's why he's got his mouth.
Damn. Woo-hoo.
He knows what he wants. He goes for it, and he's gotten it his whole life. So it's like he's drawing an interesting, because it is interesting how different James is from Lars.
Yeah.
James grew up, dad left, then shortly after, mom passed away. He had to go live with his brother, super shy. Lars grew up like in a loving family, traveling with his dad, always had money,
to do all the things he wanted to do.
Encouraged to follow his fucking dreams. Hetfield had no dreams.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the what's dynamic about their duo. But it's also in the tone of James in this moment is he's almost using those differences as a weapon. It's
right.
These are parts of the interview that feel gross to me.
Or this is, you're right, they do feel gross, but also this is a point I think in both their lives where they've, spent too much time together, where they're like, they needed this break, and obviously James ended up going to rehab and all that stuff. But I mean, it's almost like at this point they just don't give a shit.
Well, but I know, but it just feels so petty to like kind of make it a class issue after they're grown-ups. It's not Lars's fault that he had a better shake than James did.
Right, yeah.
I mean, he even goes on, he says, he introduced me to a lot of different music. I spent a lot of time at his house listening to stuff. I couldn't believe the size of his record collection. I could afford maybe 1 record a week, and he'd come back from the store with 20. To which Lars kind of pivots from that and says, I have an obsessive personality. When I become interested in something, I have to learn everything about it, whether it's Danish chairs from the Great Modern Era or Oasis. When I was 9 years old, it was all about Deep Purple. I'd spend all my time sitting outside their hotel in Copenhagen waiting for Ritchie Blackmore to come out so I could follow him down the street.
Whoa, creepy.
A little creepy, but
that shows his passion.
I resonate with that.
Absolutely. It shows his passion, as we know from the early years to present day. I mean, when Lars gets into something, I mean, he dives straight in the deep end head first. So even so much so back in the day in Copenhagen when he was like waiting for Ritchie Blackmore to come out of his hotel, it's like,
right.
I mean, that he takes that same passion.
Richie.
Excuse me, Mr. B.
It's me.
Mr. Blackmore.
It's me, Lars. As obsessed with music as I was, and maybe this is because I was in Birmingham and no famous people were ever there.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would have ever camped out in that way.
I've never done that.
Me and my friend Aaron went and saw A Perfect Circle, and I remember this is before I ever knew where buses parked or where loading was or whatever. But
behind the venue.
Turns out it's behind the venue in loading docks. But
wouldn't believe it.
But I remember we did walk to the back of Boutwell Auditorium in Birmingham, Alabama, and we waited for the buses. And I didn't even want to say anything to them. We just watched the buses pull up, and then we watched them all get off the bus.
You're like, there.
I remember I was like, that's James Eha. I remember watching.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
James Eha, Josh Freese, Jordy White. Who else was in that band? Billy Howardell and Maynard James Keenan.
Yeah.
Watch them all.
Amazing.
Get off the bus.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I've
Who have you ever germed out on? I've germed out on the band live. I got to meet them, and I germed out hard on them.
I mean, here's the thing. I haven't been in bands for a long time, and you have fans, and there's crazy ones out there. Like, I think I knew from in the early years of touring not to go too crazy when meeting somebody that you look up to. Like when I met Hetfield in the airport.
Yeah.
I mean, we chatted for like 20 minutes. It was very much small talk, straight to the point, kind of like, where are you headed? You have a guitar? Are you a musician? Hetfield was like, yes, I am. Just kidding. The only time I ever got anything that, I felt kind of uncomfortable to ask was when I asked for a photo. And then the security guard said no. The security guard said no photos. Understandable. Great. And I respectfully said, no worries. Appreciate your time.
But fuck you.
I'm never listening to your band again.
Unless I get it from, you heard it, Napster.
Yeah. And that was not long. I mean, dude, this interview was not long before I met him. I mean, I probably met Hetfield in 2003.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you met him in 2008. That's when you went to the concert.
I went to see him the first time in 2009.
So when you met him in the airport and he offered to shake your hand twice.
Yep.
That was 2003?
Dude, it was, I have a feeling, I don't know where he went to rehab that first time.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling it was in Southern California because he was definitely sober by then. He was flying home from Orange County to the Bay Area in the normal peasant line, not in the first class line, not priority.
Right.
I mean, I think it was part of his journey and sobriety is like, hey, we're not doing first class on this.
Huh.
You know, I'm sure he doesn't. They fly private and stuff now, but still. Yeah, he was just in like the normal ass line. I'm like, you're James Hetfield. You couldn't just get a first class ticket back to Oakland?
Right.
It was crazy. So,
but he's so about not only him, but just the program is so about destroying ego and rebuilding yourself back up. And that might have been something that either was imposed on him by the program he was working, or something he himself was like, you know what, no private jets, no rock star shit.
Yes, totally.
I mean, other than my bodyguard.
Other than that guy, yeah.
And then my fucking blood diamond, American Express I'm going to lay down at McDonald's later. But
yeah, it was a trip. But I guess all that to say, to answer your question, is I've never really gurmed out hard on anybody. Like, you remember? So when you got, I didn't Chris Farley anybody.
Right. I did hard on the band live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, when you say placenta falls to the floor, did that really happen?
Did the angel really open her eyes?
Confusion really settle in.
That's really funny, dude. No, I gurmed out on the drummer.
Okay.
Ed Kowalczyk, the singer, was being really weird. At the time I met them was this year, 2000.
Yeah.
In the year 2000. It was a co-headline tour with the Counting Crows, which I was a huge fan of.
What color shirt did you wear?
Gray!
Gray is my favorite color.
You can understand, man, it's going to make me sound lame to our listeners, but I was a huge live fan.
Yeah, life's great.
And we ended up getting backstage, and we got to go to a meet and greet, and they played a couple of acoustic songs.
Oh, cool.
And then we just got to hang around this catering area with them.
That's awesome.
Ed Kowalczyk had a beard at the time and was looking, he had a really nice lady with him. Mm-hmm. And like the whole time I was talking to him, the chick he was with was behind him in the prom pose with her arms around him.
Oh, no.
And
that's weird.
He was just smiling, a big old my life is great smile.
He had one of those smiles that basically means I'm not listening to a word you're saying.
And he had sunglasses on, and it was night, and I couldn't really,
Wow, Corey.
And I told him to have a kick-ass show twice in a row.
Hey, man, have a kick-ass show. Have a kick-ass show.
No, it wasn't even that good.
Wasn't even that emphasizing.
I was like, have a kick-ass show, man. And he's like, thanks, dude. And I shook his hand, and I went to walk away. And I turned back as if to say something new had occurred to me to say, and I said it again.
So it's more like handshaking to Ed. Hey, have a kick-ass show. Hey, thanks, man. Have a kick-ass show.
Yeah, it was like that. It was. It was really rough. I mean, I could even see through his facial, even though he was wearing sunglasses with a beard, I could see his facial expression was kind of like, what? You just told me that.
Or he's about to walk on stage with the boys that night, gave a kiss to his girls with them, and looked at the boys and said, hey, guys, I talked to this student tonight.
I was told 2 times.
Twice to have a kick-ass show, so nobody better fuck this up. Okay? That kid's going to be in the crowd, and we do not want to disappoint him.
Dude, they so did not want to be there for that meet and greet thing. So they sat us all on these chairs, and they all came out. The first thing they did was they all came out on stools very somberly, and they were going to play 2 songs. And the fucking big hit at the time was a song called The Dolphins Cry, which I loved. But I didn't want to see them play The Dolphins Cry. I wanted to see like a deep cut. I'm a big deep cut cat.
Yeah.
So Ed Kowalczyk's like, well, what do you guys want to hear? Some dipshit yelled.
The Dolphins Cry.
They immediately started playing it. Like, let's get this over with.
Yeah.
It would be like someone yelling Enter Sandman.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe it.
There's always that guy.
And then I gurmed out on the drummer. I was like, see, I read that you're like a big U2 fan. He was like, yeah, I like U2. I was like, me too, man.
That's awesome.
I'm a huge U2 fan. He was like, well, that's cool, dude.
Cool.
I was like, you like Larry Mullen Jr.? He was like, well, yeah, I'm a drummer, and he's a drummer. And
I like you,
and
too.
And like I just said, I'm a big U2 fan. And I literally was like, oh, man, that is so cool. I like Larry Mullen Jr., too.
Yeah. I've totally talked to people like you.
It was
or
so
that personality
brutal.
at meet and greets in past years.
It was so brutal, man.
I mean, sometimes it's,
I have
get nervous.
I have pictures from it, from meeting them. I'll have to find them.
Yes, you will. Your mom have them or something? Or are they here?
We had, when we knew we were getting in, we went and bought a disposable camera.
Yeah.
Because I got in with 2 of my buddies.
We're going to tear this house apart after we're done recording this episode.
Okay. Well, I'll really try to find them.
Please do. I'd love to see it.
I guess we should talk about Metallica again.
Oh shit! Right.
You know what? Let's hear a word from our sponsors from Nuprin, and then we will get back into the Playboy interview.
Sounds good.
I can't talk about it anymore. It's giving me a headache.
Here, take 2 of these.
Ah, Nuprin. Little, yellow, different.
All right, well, moving on back to the interview here. Playboy asked, which I thought this was interesting, how alienated was James when you met him? And Lars said, I've never met anyone that shy, really withdrawn, almost afraid of social contact. And then he says he also had really bad acne. It's like
you don't need to say that.
It's like a lot of these dudes would answer it like the way they would answer a normal interview.
Right.
And then they have to throw some bullshit in there.
Something, an unnecessary little dig.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah, he was really shy, painfully shy. He didn't have a lot of social skills. Also horrible acne.
I mean, we all know the story of Hetfield, and hey, everybody who are listeners, our watchers on Instagram Live.
Yeah, we're on Instagram Live, so we're doing an episode right now, and people can see us doing it.
It's a preview.
Hetfield says of that, he said, there wasn't much to say, I guess. When I met Lars, my mom had just passed away. Everyone was the enemy back then. I wasn't the best at talking. Once the band formed, I thought, I don't have to talk anymore. Lars can say it all. And then he starts to talk a little bit about his religious background. He says, I was raised Christian Scientist, which is a strange religion. The main rule is God will fix everything. You don't need doctors. It was alienating and hard to understand. I couldn't get a physical to play football, and it was weird having to leave health class during school. I mean, I'm thinking about my kid right now. Like, that would be hard to put your kid through that.
Right, exactly.
And I understand, like religious conviction and religious beliefs are important, and you want to instill that in your kids. And there's even a biblical phrase that talks about, like, you need to be willing to be made fun of, to be ridiculed in the world, to follow this path, because you're going to be.
But also think, too, once your kid gets old enough, you want to give them the choice. Like, hey, we're going to instill this in you. This is how we raised you. But at a certain point, we can't force you to still believe this.
I think that's too much to put on your kids. I think that the job as a parent is to present information to your kid. I mean, we tell our kid that certain things aren't true.
Right.
My kid will ask me about Santa Claus or about Jesus or something, and we tell her, well, that's a story that people tell. Mm-hmm. But we also don't shield her from that. When she's with my sister, she goes to church with them. And believe me, my sister and her family, they're telling her all about Jesus, the good news of Jesus. I would never put anything on my kid. I would never tell my kid, when you say the pledge, you don't say one nation under God, because we don't believe that.
Right.
That's just too much. It's too much.
It is too much for a kid. You're right.
I think that it's our job to teach our kids what's true about the world, but you have to kind of meet them where they are, and you can't just. I can't put my abject secularism onto my 5-year-old.
Yeah, well, when I'm talking about them making up their own minds and having their own choice in the matter of religion, for instance, I'm talking about when they're older, in their teen years, late teens, where it's like
Brad Blazek just said, "I was expecting Clinton a guitar, but got Ethan instead." Nice.
Instead, Clint's here too. Still.
Well, first of all, I'm here too.
Yeah.
Secondly, I was expecting Clinton a guitar. We got Ethan. Nice.
Finally, no Clinton a guitar.
Wow.
With his digital sunglasses.
I'm starting to regret that we're doing this experiment. Anyway, you were making a good point. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
My point being, giving your child, the free choice to figure out what they believe spiritually, kind of before they're about to get, pushed out of the nest. That's that when you put them out into the world. I mean, and some people will stay true to what they were taught as a kid the rest of their life. Some people will change. I've changed a lot from what I grew up.
I think the most important tool that you can give your kid when it comes to any kind of philosophy about life,
definitely a hatchet.
Whether if there's one thing we've learned, is that you need to at least give them a hatchet so they can build fires and build the huts.
You got to stay warm in the wintertime.
No, the biggest tool you can give your kid is the ability to think for themselves.
Right.
And, whatever my daughter believes about the world, if she arrives at that conclusion, having done it herself, she's not been brainwashed by anyone, including me and her mother, I will be happy as a father. Kirk says, James came from a broken home, and I come from a broken home. When I joined the band, we bonded over that. I was abused as a child. My dad drank a lot, beat up my mom and me quite a bit. I remember having to pull my dad off my mom when he attacked her one time during my 16th birthday. Definitely channeled a lot of anger into music. I was also abused by my neighbor when I was 9 or 10. The guy was a sick fuck. He had sex with my dog, Tippy.
Jeez.
Now, this is stuff I've never seen Kirk talk about.
I know. That's some dark stuff right
Abused
there.
by his dad. Never learned that. Poor kid.
Had to watch his mom get abused.
Had to watch his mom get abused by his neighbor, and had to watch his neighbor have sex with his dog Tippy.
That's real fucked up. That's really messed up stuff.
Super weird.
Man, I need to take a shower. I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know some of the stuff about Kirk, you know?
I've felt loneliness in my life.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe in many ways I'm prone to loneliness. However, I've never been so lonely that I had sex with a dog.
Yeah,
That's
with you on that one. Yeah, not happening.
Playboy asked, it does seem that heavy metal attracts a disproportionate number of people who've been abused. Hammett says, I think heavy metal is therapeutic. It's music that blows the tension away. It allows people to release aggression and tension in a nonviolent way. Also, heavy metal has a community feeling and brings outsiders together. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Lars adds to that, says, I've always had issues with that because I don't feel I had major psychological damage in my life. Why is that limited to metal? If you line 10 Metallica fans up against the wall, you get 10 different stories, which I think is a great point, too.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You know, he had a good childhood, he had a good life, and look at Cliff. I mean, look at Cliff's parents.
Cliff had a great childhood as well.
But there's always things to be angry about when you're a kid, and if you just pay attention to the world and look around, there's stuff to be angry about.
And sometimes that music that you do get into, in this case metal, might bring out those things. Like it might make you more aware of the world around you. And then, oh, now I'm pissed off about this.
Right.
And I want to write more about it.
Right.
Yeah, you can come from, you don't have to be a tortured soul to get into metal or to write metal.
And I like that Lars is pushing back against that.
Yeah.
This is interesting. Playboy asked, at the beginning of the band, did you consider any names other than Metallica?
This is good.
Lars says, we had a list of 20 possible names. Check these out. Nixon, Helldriver, Blitzer, and he said he was really keen on a band name, Thunderfuck.
Thunderfuck 65.
The debut album, Metal Up Your Ass by Bay Area's own Thunderfuck.
Have you heard And Justice for All by Thunderfuck?
Dude, I don't know if my favorite Thunderfuck album is And Justice for All or Master of Puppets, but I will say this, anything Thunderfuck, A-okay with me.
It's funny that one of them was called Nixon.
Nixon, yeah, the watch company.
The watch company.
We were going to be called Nixon, and instead of making heavy metal, we were going to actually make timepieces.
Right, but then we heard that there was, in the future, we took a time machine, there's going to be a Nixon watch company, so we figured we'd go with Metallica.
All right,
Thunderfuck.
I do want to put a little warning here. We're about to get into some kind of gross groupie talk.
I felt a little disturbed reading some of this stuff, even though obviously from the Year and a Half thing. And
I felt like I was in the band Disturbed when I was reading this stuff.
Ooh, wah, ah, ah, ah. You ever get into Richard Cheese, who does all the lounge covers of songs?
I love Richard Cheese.
His Disturbed cover, he does a, ooh, wah, ah, ah.
He does a great Yellow Ledbetter. On a sea there, on a whistle mountain. He doesn't even know the words. There are no words.
There are no words.
Ledbetter.
Yeah. He makes them up every night.
Dude, Pearl Jam is easily in my top 5 favorite bands. You know this. I know you're also a big fan because you got invited to go to a show and you invited all of your friends except me. I was probably busy playing a gig at the Ryman.
Yeah, it's true.
But Yellow Ledbetter, which when I was a kid I loved. Who didn't love that song when we were kids?
Great,
but
yeah.
as an adult, and particularly as a songwriter, I'm like, how the fuck are they going to put that song out and never write lyrics to it? They perform it at almost every show.
It's amazing.
There's no lyric. It's just gibberish.
But people love it.
People love it.
I'll tell you what is probably the test of time in that there's just really good melodies in that song. Great lead, great feel in that song. So, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, it would fit great on a Sigur Rós record. Playboy asks, when did you start to draw female fans? To which Kirk says, girls were always at the shows. It's just that they didn't look much different than the guys.
Fair.
Brutal. Ulrich says, girls would come on the bus and blow the whole bus.
This is where it gets weird.
Like, okay, here's 2 girls, everybody get in line. People would say, ooh, she just blew that other guy. So? You don't have to put your tongue down her throat.
I'm already uncomfortable.
Hetfield says they enjoyed what they did and haha, they were good at it. Back then we all shared stuff. I did her. Dude, here, have my chick. Lars would charm them, talk his way into their pants. Kirk had a baby face that was appealing to girls, and Cliff had a big D-I-C-K. I don't even want to say it. Word got around about that, I guess. Ulrich says, we used to have this thing called Tough Tarts. It was fucking great. We'd come off stage and there'd be 10 naked girls in the showers.
I mean, we heard some about that in the Year in the, or it was in the VH1 Behind the Music. Hetfield talks about that, but still.
I mean, look, I've never done anything like that at this point in my life. I'm looking at an imaginary watch. I never will. But even if I were, I would have a pretty strict, we're not talking about this in interviews policy.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
I mean, maybe at this point it's because they're all remarried or whatever. But I mean, well, Lars was going through divorce, but Yeah, I would think if you were a band that was into that kind of stuff, you would be like, hey, let's not talk about this in public forums.
It's surprising. Playboy asks, who was the biggest slut in the band? To which Lars says, we all had some pretty slutty moments. I don't think there's anybody in the band who hasn't had crabs a couple times or the occasional drip D-I-C-K. I can't even say this stuff. It's so gross.
It's so gross.
Finally, we get Newsted involved when Cliff comes up. And Jason says, Cliff Burton was my god. He was the guru. No one before him and no one since has played like that. People copied him, but no one ever had his feel or his prowess. Which, Jason always had such cool things to say about Cliff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really obvious that he really was a big hero of his.
Well, I mean, even in the next part of the interview, Playboy asked him if he was a big fan in Arizona. He said, Metallica was the hugest influence for my band Flotsam and Jetsam. We must have played at Arizona at clubs and for desert parties.
He says he didn't make any money playing until he joined Metallica.
Yeah.
He says the most I remember making for what we thought was a huge gig was $26 between 5 of us. That's pretty rough.
That's real rough.
If you're making $26 split 5 ways, you have to be asking yourself, what's the future looking like? I may need a trade here. He was asked if he ever missed that, which I thought this answer was cool. He says, I miss being grimy. I miss the hunger. I miss the excitement of taking off work early to set up the gear at the club, and 7 people would show up, but you still play like there's 700.
I mean, I'm with you. I'm with him.
I felt that when I read that. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I totally miss that feeling. I mean, there's still times where like I'll play local shows and not that many people show up, and maybe 7 people show up. I guess part of me is just the ego part of it is over, and I just have a good time playing live. But I'm with him. I totally miss those early years of like discovering yourself in music and your bandmates and writing songs, getting better at riffs,
getting hair in new places.
Totally, having to take Nuprin after a night of headbanging.
You're a little different. He is asked, have you ever seen Metallica while Cliff was alive? He says, yes, in Phoenix with Wasp before Puppets came out. Front row, right in front of Cliff, worshiping and drooling, banging madly. $14 for a shirt, which was all the money in the world at the time. We only went to see Metallica. As soon as Metallica was done, we walked out. They crushed it, and we knew everything they did by heart.
Gosh, that's so cool. I mean, like, one of their biggest fans became their bass player.
I was reading through the So What compilation last night, and in one of them, the whole band was asked, have you guys ever gotten to play with people who inspired you to make music? And of course, Jason's the first one to answer, and he's like, yep, Kirk Hammett, James Hetfield, and Lars Ulrich, who I get to be in a band with now called Metallica.
That's awesome. I think I've heard of him.
It would be fun if he was like, yep, James Hetfield, Kirk Hammett, and Lars Ulrich, 3 guys I get to be in a band with now called Echobrain.
Now called Thunderfuck.
Thunderfuck. He talks about his audition. He's asked if they brought you to San Francisco. What were you nervous? Jason says, I was nervous the whole week, didn't sleep, might have lain down a couple of times, but for 5 days I stayed up and played as long as I could. Blisters on blisters broke. When I could feel the nerve inside as I played the string, I stopped for a little while. Ooh, that's gross. A couple of my friends got together some money to pay for a $140 plane ticket to go to the audition.
Wow.
Hope he wrote them a nice little finder's fee check or something.
Yeah.
Some sort of kickback.
I mean, on one end, it is kind of crazy. I know the interviewer asked this, but it is kind of crazy that, if they want him an audition, they don't fly him there. But at the same time, it's like, hey, you can have a chance to audition for one of the biggest bands around right now. You're going to have to get yourself here, though. We got plenty of people to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand that. He says, were they tough on the people who were auditioning? Jason talks about a guy that came in, and he just had a quiet riot. Band member had signed his bass, and James kicked him to the curb.
This goes next.
He says, tell me about your first year with Metallica. And Newsted says, hazing and a lot of emotional tests. To which Hetfield kicks in and says, we were mourning through anger. You're here instead of Cliff, so here's what you get. It was therapy for us.
Yeah, I mean, not that everything was, called for, but, I mean, their best friend just died. I mean, within the same year, they're auditioning, hiring a bass player, and he's starting, and they're back on the road. They're
and they're alcoholics, and they're young, and they're with one of the biggest rising metal bands in the world.
Yeah.
So it's just a perfect storm to not treat someone with maturity and grace. Playboy asked, "What did they do, and why did you put up with it?" And he says, "Because it was Metallica. It was my dream come true. I was definitely frustrated, fed up, and kind of feeling unliked. They did it to see if I could handle it. If you're going to replace Cliff Burton, you have to be resilient." Then they start talking about drinking, which, again, if you guys keep this timeline hovering in your head, this would be late fall and early winter of 2000. James would be checking himself into rehab in '01, right? I think it was April of '01. This was about a month after this article came out. They asked who the biggest drinker was. Everyone said James. He would drink half a bottle of Jaeger by himself, as well as vodka. Lars says James Hetfield, for quite a while, he was embracing alcohol at a different level than the rest of us. And even James said, I had to have a bottle of vodka just to have fun. I'm surprised I'm still alive.
That's crazy. That's dark.
And Newsted said James is the only one that ever drank so much he couldn't show up for a rehearsal or for photos. He's the only one who ever actually poisoned himself.
Gosh, heavy, man.
They are asked about other drugs. They were asked if any one of them got into speed.
It's so crazy that he specifically would ask about that.
About speed?
Yeah, like, hey, did you guys get into any of the drugs? That's question ended right there.
Well,
what about speed?
Because I guess as maybe like a snaky journalist type, he didn't want them to get away with just saying they smoked pot.
Right.
I guess he's kind of asking about hard shit. Kirk says speed's a bad word in our camp, but speed freaks love us. Lars said James is the only one who never really engaged in any kind of drug abuse. Me, Jason, Kirk, and Cliff were always experimenting with different things to a higher degree. Kirk adds, cocaine has definitely been in our lives. I had a bad coke problem on the Injustice for All tour, but I pulled out of that because it makes me depressed, basically. I tried smack once. I was so thankful that I hated it.
Yeah, me too.
You're glad that he hated it?
Yes, I'm not glad that I tried it and hated it.
Lars says, I tried acid once. I was shit fucking scared. The only drug I've ever really engaged in is cocaine. He says it gave me another couple of hours of drinking. Again, is like another thing I'm surprised they're just being so frank about.
This was one of the kind of big shocker takeaways for me was how open they are with a lot of this stuff. Maybe because at this point it was kind of in the past, but I mean, I'm pretty sure Lars was still doing that kind of stuff for years after this.
Yeah.
Because he credits, I think, Noel Gallagher of helping him get off cocaine.
They pivot back to Jason and the hazing, and it says, Jason, as time went on, did the band stop hazing you? And this is some more telling stuff for him quitting a little later. He says, they actually got tougher as time went on. The second and third years were the most brutal. Instead of fraternity pranks, there were things that cut deep and were based on disrespect.
It's crazy.
The Playboy asks, what did they do that was disrespectful? And he says, turning down the bass on Injustice for All. So, I mean, you're hearing it straight from their mouths, like, they sort of proliferated that rumor or that explanation for the sound of justice themselves a little bit.
Right.
Some band, I think it's the Pantera guys. Oh, I read it in Rex Brown's book.
Oh, yeah.
Where he talks about they ran into Metallica on the road and they had just mixed Injustice for All, and that James and Lars were laughing about how they turned the bass down to fuck with Jason. So they're all kind of saying it. We've explored that topic so often. Of course,
sure.
They're not going to really sabotage their own record just to fuck with Jason, but I can see how that may have played into a narrative of hazing about him.
Sure, that, or maybe like, it became, it originally was a thing where they hazed him and, hey, let's turn the bass down. And maybe they listened to enough of these rough mixes, enough with the bass down, they thought, this sounds great. And they just left it.
That's exactly what it was. Playboy asked James, is Jason even on Injustice for All? And James says his picture's on it and then laughs. He says, someone sent me a joke CD with a sticker on the outside that says Injustice for All, now with bass. Lars says it's the only record of ours, meaning Injustice for All, that I'm not entirely comfortable with. It became about ability and almost athletics rather than music. Playboy says bands are usually like families, and it sounds like this family fights a whole lot. Hammett says, I find myself playing referee. I've been the buffer between James and Lars. I've been the buffer between Lars and Jason. James says that Lars is usually the instigator with his mouth. He can be a real ass at times and pull attitudes. I punched him on stage once, probably our third gig ever. We agreed we were going to play Let It Loose for our encore. He went up there and started playing Killing Time because it started with drums. I called him a motherfucker, and then I couldn't remember the lyrics. It was a complete failure. And then Lars says he's gotten into fights with Jason.
Yeah, this is crazy. This is some stuff I didn't really know.
Because, again, it's written in a way where you feel like they're all in the room, but they're not. Hetfield says, I'm definitely not the smartest guy in the band, so winning an intellectual argument is not going to happen. Resorting to violence used to work and intimidation. To which Kirk Hammett says, when James comes at you screaming, he can be intimidating.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, and they tell stories about how, like, James would throw Lars into his kid a couple of times. I'm like, fuck, man.
I know.
These dudes were...
Again, I mean, like
drunk kids.
I say alcohol, man. You get these personalities in there, and you get maybe past feelings of your childhood or whatever come into play.
Yeah.
Angry with the other dude, and like you're gonna.
Your neighbor fucks your dog Tippy, and
totally.
Playboy says a lot of bad things have happened to Metallica. Does that mean the band has bad karma? Which is a perfect question for Kirk. Kirk's way into the yoga and the karma.
Yeah, he's into the yoga and the karma.
Honey, the yoga, the karma, the et cetera.
Yeah, the ocean, the Hawaii.
Honey, you know what they do now is they put a goat on you. They do a thing called goat yoga.
Goat yoga. It's quite good for your back.
I told him I'll use my dog Lucius. We do everything together, including yoga.
That's what I know sometimes I'll borrow Lucius and Valentino and put them both on my back.
But they said no, it has to be a goat. It's very specific to the methods that we use. We use a goat. So I said, if you're not going to take my beautiful Lucius with me, then you're not going to have me.
Yeah.
You're going to lose me as a paying customer.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get you goat yoga on Napster.
Yeah, no yoga for you.
No yoga for me and no monies for yous.
But yogurt for all of us.
But yogurt and go-gurt for everybody. Kirk, responding to the karma question, says, quite possibly. He says, we've been through a lot of things. Maybe the reason James has had so many accidents is because of his own personal karma, and it affects the band. Playboy says, how would you describe the change that came after Injustice for All, starting with the Black Album? To which James, speaking about his lyrics, said, on the Black Album, when I went to write lyrics, I didn't know what the fuck to write about. I was trying to write lyrics that the band could stand behind, but we're four completely different individuals, so the only way to go was in. That was pretty insightful.
Yeah.
About Black Album through Load and Reload lyrics.
Well, I mean, everything up until then was just about, like, there was some dark stuff, and as far like Blackened and stuff like that. And early stuff was all about just fucking shit up and leather and all that stuff. So this was like the first introspective record.
Well, he talks about that. He says the turning point for him was Nothing Else Matters because it was sensitive. Mm-hmm. Newsted says, if Nothing Else Matters, at first it didn't sound very much like Metallica to me. I like the fast, heavy stuff. I don't think Metallica should do country. We came pretty close to it on Mama Said. I don't think that tasted very good.
Pretty close.
Playboy says, only a few albums have sold more than 10 million copies. Do you think the Black Album is the band's best record? Hetfield, this is some surprising stuff. He says, there are some songs on there I don't like. Through the Never was a little wacky. Don't Tread on Me, probably not one of my favorites musically. Holier Than Thou was one of the sillier songs, more the old style of writing. I'm like, oh man, that's a bummer. I love Through the Never.
Well, but yeah, I do too. I love all three of those songs that he just mentioned. But it's funny that he says Holier Than Thou was one of the sillier songs, more like the old style of writing. I mean, I agree with this.
True, that's thrashy.
Yeah, that or Struggle Within. It has some thrash elements to it, but just crazy that he's like, I'm not sure I'm into those songs, especially Through the Never.
Which I guess is just bound to be the case. Like, these are songs that we hold so dear. To them, it's just more just work they were doing, you know?
Totally.
I do. Don't Tread on Me is not a go-to song for me. But Through the Never, shit, that song is awesome.
Yeah.
Playboy says, when Load came out next, you guys had short hair and were wearing makeup and trendy clothes. Quite a change from the denim and the mullets. And this plays into, people have quoted James saying this to say that he doesn't like the Load and Reload era, but I think this is interesting. He says, I let Lars and Kirk take over for a little on the image front. I really don't like looking at it now. Our fans go, what happened to Metallica, the rebel, long-haired, greasy biker, fuck you band? Now it was U2 or Stone Temple Pilots or some band relying on an image. What did we need that for? That was so stupid. Jason and I were really not into it. Kirk and Lars were gung-ho. You either laugh about it or you get wound up. I'm doing both.
Interesting. Well, I mean, looking back on it, it's kind of like, I think he looks bitchin' in some of those old photos.
Dude, when he dyed his hair black in like the Load booklet, and he's got the black mustache and black hair.
Yeah. No, I thought it was some cool stuff. But I mean, if you think about kind of where James, how he dressed up most of the time before that, and then post like Saint Anger, he kind of went back to that, like, was wearing battle vests and all that stuff. I think he always just kind of wanted to be that kind of more metal looking dude.
Yeah, and I get that. I get it. But again, just to put a little marker in the sand here, I don't think that James's issues with the Load and Reload era had anything to do with the music. He was the primary writer of all that
right,
music.
Exactly. Just image.
I think it was just the image. Like Lars and Kirk kissing in the press. And
yeah, totally.
The fucking guy liner and the boa and the
cigars and
all
that
stuff. Shit.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Playboy says, you describe drinking and performing as therapeutic. Have you ever been in real therapy? And this is when James talks about actually he'd quit drinking in the Load era. He says, around the time of Load, I felt like I wanted to stop drinking. He thought maybe I was missing out on something. Everyone else seems happy. I want to get happy. Going to therapy for a year, I learned a lot about myself. There's a lot of things that scar you when you're growing up. You don't know why. The song Bleeding Me is about that. I was trying to bleed out all the bad, get the evil out. While I was going through therapy, I discovered some ugly stuff in there, a dark spot.
Yeah.
He says, I took more than a year off from drinking and the skies did not part. It was just life, but less fun. The evil didn't come out. I wasn't laughing, wasn't having a good time. I realized drinking's a part of me. Now I know how far to go. You can't be hungover when your kids are needing you. He says, I wouldn't say I'm an alcoholic, but then, alcoholics always say they're not alcoholics. So that's a little cringy when you look at what would happen.
Right, not that long after that. I mean, he'd be putting a halt to St. Anger and going to rehab.
But that, that comes down to, and I've had friends do this, like when you get sober, you really do have to do it for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he was just sort of tired of, as he says, planning his life around hangovers. Oh, the Misfits are playing Friday. That means my Saturday is going to be gone because I'm going to be so hungover.
Right, yeah, hangover day.
And he says that's why he quit for a year and the skies didn't part. So basically what he said is like there was no revelation. I just basically was just not drinking and I was still unhappy. So I started drinking again.
Right.
My friends who really got sober, who really hit rock bottom, as James would do several months from this, they would never say of their sobriety, like, nothing really revelatory happened.
Yeah,
my friends who get sober for the right reasons are like, holy shit, I almost lost everything.
Yeah, I can't believe what this looks like on the other side. Like, it is...
My job, my kids, I almost died.
Yeah, for a lot of people, for most people that do it for the right reasons and come out of it, the skies do part.
Now, I've got friends who are sober who are like, man, it sucks. I wish I could just be a normal person and have a drink. I liked drinking. I liked being buzzed.
Right.
I liked being social. I liked not feeling like I was missing out on something.
Yeah, exactly.
But very few, I don't think I've ever talked to anyone that was like, nothing really happened.
Yeah.
So I started drinking again.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
like, wow. Playboy says, James strikes us as kind of an enlightened redneck. To which Kirk says, I agree with that 100%. He lives a certain lifestyle that's easy to poke fun at. He lives out in the country, drinks a lot of beer, has a bunch of guns, goes hunting. But then this sort of turns into... Lars takes a pretty big shot at James where Playboy says, are you uncomfortable with the degree of homophobia in metal? And Lars says, totally. Ultimately, why do me and Kirk stick our tongues down each other's throats once in a while in front of the camera? Because the metal world needs to be fucked with as much as possible. When the band started, everybody would sit around proving their heterosexuality by gay bashing and stuff like that. He said, does that elevate you to some greater He-Man status? I never understood that. And he's talking about James being homophobic. Playboy says, we've heard James use the word fag jokingly. Does that mean he's homophobic? Kirk says, probably. James hasn't had a lot of experience with gay people, and that's a large reason for being homophobic. He needs to be enlightened in that area. So that's kind of Kirk's nice way of saying that.
Right, yeah.
Lars says, I know he's homophobic. Let there be no question about that. And then he digs the knife in and says, I think homophobia is questioning your own sexuality and not being comfortable with it.
It's crazy.
Like, whoa.
I mean, yeah, there's some harsh digs for sure in this whole interview. I mean, I feel like as it goes on too, it gets worse. Because, at this point, Lars is probably being told Hetfield's answer and vice versa.
Yeah.
So they're starting to get maybe worked up in the interview too.
Well, because that's another thing too, is we have no idea. This is just sort of the edited together thing. So we have no idea what other parts of this interview, what each member said that didn't get printed.
Right, yeah.
That he may have just used to provoke the other person. Mm-hmm. So I know that like when Lars and Kirk had the picture of them kissing, I know James hated that.
Sure.
So he may have said something a little more antagonistic behind the scenes that didn't get printed that would provoke Lars to be like, well, yeah, James is definitely homophobic, and I think if you're homophobic, it's because you're questioning your own sexuality.
Right, yeah. I don't think he was saying that in general. I think that was heavily directed towards Hetfield.
Which, what's the most offensive thing you can say to a homophobic person? Like, someone who's afraid of being gay or afraid of gayness, be like, well, maybe you're gay.
Yeah.
That's like the thing they're afraid of the most.
What? No, I'm not.
Whereas I've had people wonder if I was gay before, and I won't say I was flattered by it, but I certainly wasn't offended.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a legitimate question. If you didn't know I had a girlfriend or a wife and thought maybe,
absolutely.
Thought maybe a friend of mine that I hugged and told I loved was a boyfriend or something.
Yeah.
I have no problem just setting it straight that I'm straight, but there's also no like, huh?
Yeah.
Gross.
What the heck? I mean, when you're like a kid and your friends say that to each other, but it's kind of like back then we didn't really know what those what are now offensive words meant.
Yeah.
Fag was like, you're stupid.
Yeah.
But then I don't know. If someone came to me and said, are you gay? I'd be like, no, but thank you. Because most gay men I know are much better looking and well dressed than I am.
Right.
So thank you.
So then they sort of start talking shit about other bands here. I mean, this Playboy guy really stirred some shit up.
Yeah.
He says, for the first time in years, there are a lot of metal bands on top of the charts. Okay, that's fine. But then he says, most of them are pretty bad, aren't they? I'm like, dude, how about...
He's just throwing he's pulling the pin of a grenade and just tossing it in their lap.
Kirk says there's a lot of fucking crap. A lot of regurgitated stuff, too. He says that Papa Roach song, Last Resort, is the main riff from an Iron Maiden song called Hallowed Be Thy Name. I haven't compared those two. I don't know. Hetfield says Limp Bizkit seems cartoony to me. Like Rage Against the Machine, it wasn't singing. It was just some guy pissed off telling you his opinion.
That was the only part of this where I was like, hang on. Don't compare Rage Against the Machine to Limp Bizkit.
I know. I agree. Those are two different leagues for sure.
100% two different leagues.
Kirk Hammett says, to me, Limp Bizkit sounds like a second-rate Korn. Korn has a much better vocalist who is, quote-unquote, somewhat intelligent. Like, that's a backhand. Like, I like Ethan. He's somewhat intelligent.
He's somewhat intelligent.
Like, damn,
I
Kirk.
like Clint. He's somewhat attractive.
He says a band like Godsmack's just a cross between Metallica and Alice in Chains with a bit of Korn thrown in. Hetfield does say he gives some praise to Queens of the Stone Age. He says they're unique. He says bands like Rocket from the Crypt make me feel good.
I love that. Even back then he was down with Rocket from the Crypt. One of my favorite bands ever.
How did you hear of Rocket from the Crypt?
Just word of mouth. They're a San Diego band. Always kind of heard about them, and then I got into them like shortly after high school. And having played in like bands with horns, they have a horn section, but they're not a ska band. They're just a super unique sounding, cool punk rock with horns kind of band, and I just got obsessed with them. It's like one of the very few band tattoos I have tattooed on me.
So Jason's asked about he says 3 of you are married, 2 of you have kids. What's changed? And Jason starts to talk about how basically his family is Metallica, and that the other guys have had to have kids and carve their own path, and that he's basically given his whole life to Metallica. Playboy says it sounds like the sabbatical is frustrating to you because they were on this break while the other guys were basically having kids and all that shit. He says, James and Lars started this thing together. They came through all the hardships. They have serious, written in stone feelings about the band and how it needs to be run. That's very, very hard to swallow sometimes. I guess our understanding is that we don't want to be like other bands where people go off and do side projects, but I have some incredibly wonderful music with other musicians that would just floor people, but I can't release it. So he's starting to talk a little bit about this Echobrain stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Playboy says James and Lars won't let you, and Newsted says it's not Lars.
It's not Lars.
And then we get Hetfield's side. He says, we disagree about side projects. Fans have always viewed Metallica as something they can rely on. We're always there, always strong, and that's a band. We've been the same guys since day one, essentially. The only way you can get out of this band is if you die. When you say Metallica, you know what that is. Lars, James, Kirk, and what's the other guy? And he's still making a Jason joke.
Yeah.
He says, when someone does a side project, it takes away from the strength of Metallica. So there's a little ugliness lately, and it shouldn't be discussed in the press. And I always feel like even Newsted, even in the middle of this, always had good things to say. He says, James Hetfield's the heart and soul and pride of Metallica, the protector of the name. I'm not out to disrespect him. I feel like he did the best. Him and Kirk did the best out of when they wanted to get their shots in. They always made sure that they were being respectful, or at least trying to.
Well, I mean, James would dig a little deeper just because, I mean, it's James. He started the band. He can do that. Plus, he had more longevity than Jason did. And for some reason put a hard foot down on this side project business, which I think in the grand scheme of things was really not that big a deal.
Well, Playboy says James himself could respect you by letting you release the album, to which Newsted replies, we're getting really close to some things we shouldn't be talking about.
Yeah.
I'd like him to see that this music is truly a part of me, like his child is a part of him. And then this Playboy dude he tries to get in there. He says, what did James say when you told him you wanted to release the album? And Newsted says, I won't go there. We have to change the subject.
Wow.
Hetfield picks up, where would it end? Does he start touring with it? Does he sell T-shirts? Is it his band? That's the part I don't like. It's like cheating on your wife in a way. We're all married to Metallica, married to each other. Playboy says, so what's Jason supposed to do during the hiatus? To which Hetfield wrote, I don't fucking know. I'm not his travel agent. Woo!
Woo!
Woo, buddy.
Jeez. It is crazy, though, back then, man. I mean, maybe it was the alcohol and he was hitting that rock bottom point before rehab where if it's not Metallica, I don't want to even fucking hear it.
And he was so scared, I think.
But I mean, let's be honest. Echobrain would not disrupt anything in Metallica other than maybe Jason's focus or something.
I know we still need to do an episode on Echobrain and like really check it out.
Yeah.
The little I've heard, I don't really like it, and I don't see how it could be a threat to Metallica at all.
Right.
But I do think I understand psychologically. Metallica's 20 years in, and I think they're worried that they're oversaturated, a little washed up, hadn't made a record since Reload, which was 97.
Yeah.
And this Echobrain thing, I think, had a big buzz. Q Prime wanted to get involved.
Yeah.
They were selling out clubs. Jason, who was the Metallica cheerleader, it looked like he was getting his kick somewhere else. I think I can kind of understand the absurd psychological dilemma.
The jealousy. And
of course, we're looking at it like, "What? You're Metallica. What are you fucking worried about?
Right, exactly.
Let him go do Echobrain, you dummies."
Yeah, you're already taking the time off anyways.
Playboy says, so Kirk adds, I hope we can survive this in one piece without tearing each other's fucking throats out. Because here's another thing I learned from reading the So What stuff. So after when they were doing the classic albums for the Black Album, and James basically had a big meeting with Jason and said, you can't do Echobrain.
Yeah.
Kirk ran into Jason at the airport, whose flight was delayed. I guess Kirk was flying back to Hawaii. Jason maybe's flying to Montana. Mm-hmm. And he said they kind of got drunk in the airport bar together, and Jason basically was like, Kirk's like, man, it was really upsetting to hear that because it's such a tough spot for Jason.
Right, yeah.
Because James is the boss.
Yeah.
And basically the boss is telling you, when your boss tells you to do something that's unreasonable, you can't really appeal to reason.
I mean, James was so stern about this stuff that not even Lars stepped in to say, like, hey, man, just let him release it.
Well, here's what Lars has to say. It's funny you mentioned that. Lars says, do you think Jason should be able to release his album? Lars says, I wouldn't be able to look him in the eye and say, you can't put that record out. It's not who I am as a person. That's pretty much all I have to say. I can't get caught up in these meltdowns. I've got some issues in my family with my wife that are a little more weighty than whatever James Hetfield and Jason Newsted are bickering over. So he does come in and say, look, I'm not going to tell someone they can't put out a piece of fucking art.
Yeah.
But I definitely, like I mentioned earlier, I think he was emotionally tapped out.
He was checked out
dealing
for
with
sure.
his wife and
Absolutely.
his kid. He couldn't, I think he was just hoping it would resolve, and obviously it didn't.
Yeah.
Kirk says, I've spoken with Jason for hours on end. I'm upset for him. James demands loyalty and unity, and I respect that, but I don't think he realizes the sequence of events he's putting into play. Jason eats, sleeps, and breathes music, and I think it's morally wrong to keep someone away from what keeps them happy. That album will always be available in some format, whether it's on Napster or in stores. People are going to hear it. So,
Man.
And James says, I don't mind being looked at as the asshole in the band. He says, he says, well, within the band, as long as the fans think Lars is the asshole, that's fine. Man.
So many digs, man. I mean, I think that they were taking jabs at each other because they were interviewed separately and they were burnout, super tired. If they were in the same room together, I don't know if it would be as harsh.
Yeah, maybe not. But at the same time, it's like, this is how they really felt.
Yeah.
So them actually being able to say this was probably maybe one of the first times they were honest with each other through a journalist than they'd been in years.
Yeah. This is like, this dude's kind of like pre-Phil Towel. So next, the Playboy interviews asked them to zone it.
And that's the end, because once they zoned it, they were just flying high.
They were fine, yeah.
Let me fly high, Freebird. Lars says, ultimately, we have a love and respect for each other that supersedes the bickering. The key thing is we're here. Whatever conflicts you keep talking about, we still find a way to exist as a working unit and pretty much at the drop of a dime, go on stage and kick everyone's ass. To which Playboy says, is this usual for Metallica or is it worse now? Lars says, it's an interesting time to interview the four of us separately. You're hearing people getting things off their chests, almost using you as the middleman. That's what I just said.
Yeah.
It's almost as if I've read this interview.
Hey, no way.
Like James and Jason won't call each other, so they're having a conversation through you. And he says, you and James haven't talked either, to which Lars says, I haven't spoken to him for a while. And I guess they're playing the game of like, he won't call me, so I won't call him.
Right, exactly.
Which as a fan is so maddening, especially once we get into the Jason stuff, because it's like, they started having these, when they got Phil involved, they started having these marathon sessions where they all felt better than they've ever felt, and yet Jason was still leaving.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Like, come on.
It's so avoidable, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, but even in like the clip of Jason in Some Kind of Monster where he's just talking about, we can overcome this. It's almost like in a way, the fighting and the bickering, like he wanted to get through, and maybe if they would have done that, he would have stayed or something. I don't know.
This is getting towards the end here, and Playboy asks, how much longer can the band go on given how physical the music is? And this plays to this is the Newsted quote you were talking about earlier. He says, it's limited. People won't ever see me weak, won't ever see me just standing there on stage. When the day comes that I can't perform, I'll bow out, and that's it.
Man, it's crazy. Man, because at this point, he's definitely thinking about it. He's already maybe not made up his mind 100%, but he's definitely checking out.
Playboy asked, are there any tricks to writing a Metallica song? This is one of Newsted's digs at James. He says, about 90% of Metallica songs are in E minor because James's vocal range is limited, although he's developed by leaps and bounds. I would just never say that about my lead singer.
I would never say that about him.
I would choose to talk about their strengths, not their limitations.
Yeah, exactly, which may be true like that. But I mean, God, I don't know. I think by the time of this interview came out, I mean, God, the progression from James from Kill 'Em All to S&M was unreal. His vocal capabilities and his vocal range, how much it expanded at that point.
Playboy asked James if the next batch of songs will be happy, to which James says, yeah, I'll start writing about my house and family and dog. He says, look, there's always got to be some turmoil to write, and now within the band there might be some pretty good fuel. Playboy says on the next record we can expect a song called, and James says, side project.
My gosh.
There's always something that's going to piss you off, something you'd like to change, something that confuses you. All I have to do is go to San Francisco for one day and I get pissed off enough for a week.
Jeez.
Playboy asks, can you still find the dark spot? To which James says, and this is the end of the interview, I know it's there and how it got there. I can visit it and leave again. It's a dark spot you can't wash off. The end.
God, it gets dark there at the end. But, it's a good telling time in history of Metallica.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just knowing what comes next with Jason leaving, James going to rehab, making Saint Anger, but then kind of coming out on top of that, getting Rob in the band. Saint Anger wasn't well received, but then they start going on all these great tours. Then we get Death Magnetic and so on and so forth. And
it's helpful to remember too that it wasn't well received necessarily, but it went number 1 in like 30 countries.
Yeah.
They went on a sold out stadium tour and they won a Grammy.
Yeah.
So by some standard, I mean, it was shocking. It was
the
a
industry
fucking shocking
standards,
record.
it was a successful record.
I mean, we're still a few years away from the catharsis of post rehab, some kind of monster. Metallica rising again. There's still some shitty shit to come. Shitty shit.
Yeah, they will not rise like the phoenix that they are just yet.
So to wrap up this episode, so in the So What book, all right, so that's late 2000, January of 2001, Jason's out. Cliff Bernstein has an emergent... Cliff Bernstein's the one that got Phil involved.
Yeah.
Because I think Phil Towle had worked with Rage, who was also Q Prime.
Okay.
So Cliff Bernstein basically is like, emergency meeting... We're not going to fucking let this band fall apart.
Yeah.
They get Phil in, and they start having all these long 9-hour sessions where it comes out that Jason really is leaving.
Yeah.
So now Metallica is, then there were 3. Then the Playboy interview comes out. And so everyone's like, oh, shit, connecting the dots. Because this interview was really kind of a big deal at the time. It really scared everybody. So what Stefan Shirazi did is he called kind of an emergency roundtable with the 3 dudes. So this is March of 2001.
Okay.
The Playboy interview has just come out. And he talks about how the part of the story which rankled with me personally was the cheap character portrayals. James was painted as a dictatorial redneck, Kurt as a Zen warrior, Jason as a chip-shouldered, hard-done-by victim, and Lars as a Hollywood-style showbiz dude.
Man.
People are never that simple, and thus the portrayals failed to offer proper dimension. And from this came the idea that Echobrain, the one issue, was the main reason for the split. A 15-year-old relationship doesn't end over one thing. It was the culmination of many matters, most of which the band have agreed to keep to themselves. Jason has his own reasons too, and when he feels the time is right, if ever, he'll be the one to offer them. So this is kind of like the 3 of them having lunch.
Right.
They're all having a beer. In the pictures, they actually went to Kirk's house afterwards, and you can see in these pictures, they're like in Kirk's kitchen all having a beer together.
Just hanging out.
And the general tone of this interview is pretty light.
Yeah.
The thing that's kind of sad about it is, shortly after this, James would go to rehab.
Yeah, very shortly.
Because things weren't great.
Yeah.
So, this is a couple months later. They're having these marathon hangs with Phil. Jason's definitely still out of the band, but I think they're like talking to Jason every day.
Yeah.
In this interview, Lars is like, I had a 15-minute conversation with Jason the other day that wasn't about Metallica at all. And he's like, we haven't talked that way in 10 years.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm actually really excited about where I'm at with Jason, finally. And Kirk's even saying shit like, it's a real shame that as a band, this new Metallica, this new sensitive Phil Towle Metallica, it's a shame that Jason can't be on that ride with us as a band member.
To communicate to them, all these things, to communicate with each other.
And we've talked about that. Like, everything Jason wanted Metallica to be kind of happened. It took him leaving. The sacrificial lamb, as it were.
Yeah. Oh, Jason is our little lamb.
And we're going to go into all that on the Jason episode, but I only wanted to read the few things that were relevant to the Playboy interview.
Right, exactly.
Because this is them looking back on it a little bit. Kirk Hammett says, if you compare that capsule in time to where we are right now, we're miles away. I hope that people don't read the Playboy interview and think that's where the 3 of us are still at. That's just not the case.
Yeah.
And James says, to me, it doesn't matter. Lars says it doesn't matter. James says, I don't give a shit. That's where we were at that point, and that interview occurred when we were the most disconnected from the band that we'd ever been.
Man.
He says, and the Playboy writer really exploited the fact. A lot of the things that he said, we just sit here and laugh about them. We've always laughed about them. Those aren't major shocks. Those aren't things that are, ooh, he said this about me. That shit we say to our faces all the time. So people that really know us know that's not a big deal.
Wow.
And I don't know. I mean, I think some of that stuff had some barbs in it that weren't what they would say to their faces. I don't think James is gonna, hey Lars, good job on that track on The Memory Remains. By the way, we all know you're not drummer of the year. You know that, right?
Yeah, we all know that. Yeah.
And Jason's not gonna go, yeah, you're a pretty limited vocal. I mean, you've grown a little bit, but you're a limited vocalist.
I mean, I can maybe see them, getting those stabs out if they're all sitting around just hammered drunk or something, and it's already getting on each other's nerves and stuff. Maybe they'll throw one of those out there.
Lars says, let me also say that if everybody else out there thinks that we're in that portrayed mental frame in the Playboy interview, it makes what we have now even cooler because it's sort of our little thing. No one else really knows about it, and that's really cool. I think the Playboy interview is really good. I think it's really well written, and I think the stuff that everybody's talking about is cool because it will almost serve as a testament forever of that time where things were at their lowest point. And that's a good point. I like that Lars is like, actually, I think they did a good job. He says it again. He's like, I think the piece was well written, and I think you've got 4 guys sitting there saying 4 different things. The writer should fucking exploit it. That's what he gets paid to do, and that's what people want to read. So that doesn't either anger me or surprise me. But I think that where we're at now is even more special because what people read in this Playboy thing that came out this week, they think that's where we're at. And if that's so, we will continue to be one step ahead of where everybody else. And that's pretty cool.
And that's the bottom line. I also think they don't really give a shit what people are thinking about the interview because at this point in the band's career, they are so used to having cameras around them, documenting everything. It's like, okay, so big deal. We have some stabs that we just kind of stick at each other.
He says, I think later when the Jason shit started to happen, I got worried and I thought maybe we should pull this Playboy interview or make it go away. But later I thought, why? If it's us, it's honest. It's where we were at the time. If people want to think that's where we're at all the time, that's too bad. If you interview someone after their dog dies, you're going to get a certain thing than after they get a new dog.
Yeah.
He said, don't take that as a direct comparison, but you know what I'm getting at. Which that's true. I mean, someone's state of mind. It's just that's why I try to have compassion on someone who gets bad. Like, ooh, Josh Homie's an asshole because he kicked a photographer or whatever.
Right.
It's like, man, you never know what people are dealing with, and you got to really take more of an aggregate of someone's behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. What was Kid Rock going through the night when he decided to get super hammered drunk and tell Oprah some awful crap?
Alcohol, man. You think he would have gone on that rant if he wasn't fucking hammered?
I mean, I know he's been vocal about that kind of stuff in the past, but not like that. I mean,
he wouldn't have gone on a rant in such a manner that his own club security had to pull him off stage.
Yeah.
He was in his own bar.
His own bar here in Nashville. Yeah.
I just feel like the older I get, the clearer it is to me that what good is alcohol for people, man? What really? I mean,
yeah.
and I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a sober guy. I still drink occasionally, but I'm drinking way less. And it's just a lot of problems that I see in life, especially in the music industry, derive from alcohol abuse, man.
Well, I mean, even times I'm sure you've had it happen where like you drink too much or you and your wife maybe both drink too much and then you just get into an unnecessary fight.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Bicker for no reason.
Well, because I get super sensitive.
Yeah.
And something that in a more reasonable state of mind that my wife says or does, I would just blow it off or I would use the decade of goodwill we have to fill in whatever gap I think is missing.
Sure.
On alcohol, I'm just super sensitive, unreasonable, prickly, and then not even making good arguments.
Yeah. Also unmotivated. Like I have noticed the comparison from, having many drinks to not having any drinks when it comes to music and stuff like that. Like I'll, 1 cocktail, 2 cocktails, you're having a good time writing some music, recording something. By 3 or 4, you're like, at least for me, I'm like, I'll work on it tomorrow. I'm just gonna make some popcorn and watch something on Netflix.
Right.
And then the next morning I wake up, I'm like, I just cut off creativity last night.
Right.
Which is such BS, like to do to myself.
Yeah. I mean, if mild drug use or whatever, I mean, I'm pro whatever you want to do, as long as you don't hurt anybody. But especially if you're a creative person, if that's getting in the way instead of helping your creative process, I just think that if you're an artist, you should rethink that.
Right. Totally.
It needs to be a tool, not something that that harms the process.
If we can only tell our former selves that from 3 years ago when we would record 2 episodes a night and drink the whole time.
Well, in the famous words of the philosopher Alanis Morissette, you live, you learn. You love, you learn. You cry, you laugh. You lose, you learn. Well, we're going to end on those wonderful words of wisdom.
Thank you, Alanis.
Thanks to everyone for listening to Metal Up Your Podcast. We will be talking about 2001. We'll be talking about Jason Newsted. We've got a bunch of cool guests that we're still trying to figure out all the logistics. Don't forget January 12th, Metal Up Your Podcast 3rd year anniversary party. Get your travel situations fixed now.
Oh, yes. We'll have a good old time. Maybe some live music. We're not sure yet. We and Clint have yet to sit down and kind of plan out the night, but it is happening. It's confirmed with the Cobra. We're going to have a good old time.
We're going to have a gay old time.
We'll have a gay old time.
Peace.
Adios.
If you were our advisor, what would you say? Then I would say delete that.